Hey everybody, Roll the Lines UK, Matthew Turner, Anthony Fitzpatrick, Tom Wilkinson. This is the pre-show chat just before we go live properly in a little bit. How you doing, boys?
All good. How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty solid. It's been interesting. It's the busiest day of the year tomorrow for an accountant, so it's been fun. And I ducked out of doing overtime because I was doing this because I offered to do overtime at the weekend. They said no, so here I am. How you doing, Ant?
Yeah, not doing bad. We're getting echo. You need to turn your sound off.
Yeah.
Okay, I will turn it off.
But hearing your voice twice, Ant, not the worst thing in the world.
Oh, oh no! I'm gonna go red here. I forgot Steve on the. I was not prepared for this. I usually have to wait until Steve's on the show till I get these sort of compliments. But I appreciate it, Tom. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, what do you guys do at the weekend apart from watch the football? You get up to much?
No, it was very disappointing this weekend. Chesterfield got their ass whipped, and then I watched two very unsatisfactory championship games. So yeah, it wasn't the greatest in the world. I'm not gonna lie, but I did it. Was up till 4 last night. Got through it. One game to go. Um, oh, I hate this Super Bowl. I don't know about you two, but I'm just.
Oh, I love this
I
Super Bowl.
love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't. I think it's just the constant kissing of certain areas of Kansas by all the major guys out there, and you know what the Eagles are like. I feel like they're there by default. I really wanted to see a game between them and San Francisco, and we were denied that game, and it's just like, fair play to them for getting there, absolutely, but it's just like you want to see it be competitive, and it was just not competitive in the slightest.
And both, I've heard people be like, oh, like they didn't deserve to get there because they've only beaten these players. Like, no, two things can be true. They can basically walk there because of the teams they were playing and still would have, in my opinion, beaten a full strength San Francisco team. So it's like both things can be true, but it still doesn't change the fact that they've just had two like preseason friendlies basically to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, isn't it? You want to see the best at this point. You get to the championship game, you want to see two juggernauts go at one another and have a great game, and and you could tell it would have been like San Francisco hung in there just until the defense got knackered. But if it had been a bit fair, but hey ho, it happens. I'm rooting for the Eagles to win this because I can't stand Mahomes love fest all summer. So please, Eagles, do it for us all. And plus, Slay gets a chip. I'm not one for going after ex players and thinking about the past and all that. But fair play, go out and get it. You've earned one, dude.
Yeah, we'll chat more about the conference championship on audio stream, but I don't know. I didn't hate the AFC game. It was competitive at least.
No, the AFC game was good. Yeah.
And I thought
I'm just,
Burrow looked great.
I'm just more mad at the team. I think since he screwed themselves and the Chiefs, yeah, I feel like they maybe got a little bit lucky. Let's just say. I think if we'd have been in that game and there'd been some of those calls made against us, we'd not be very happy bunnies today. But since he screwed themselves just as much, so yeah, that was close. And they always play each other close. It's like always decided by a field goal. So yeah, AFC was better.
Mike's in the chat and he just said Mahomes is becoming the new Aaron Rodgers. And I agree to an extent, like the way that he's praised is the same way that Rodgers is praised. But Rodgers is an egotistical maniac, whereas I don't think Mahomes is. Like, I don't look at Mahomes and think he's swinging his dick about or making it all about him. Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like it's more media driven than it is him driven.
But
And his brother doesn't make it easier, but I don't think it's about Patrick himself. He just goes about his business and is pretty quiet otherwise, compared to
but
most quarterbacks.
But the start of his career was Aaron Rodgers was never that egotistical guy either. He sat for a long time. He couldn't. I think over time he might turn into that overbearing dude, but we'll have to see with it. But
Won't have contract drama with him for the next 7 years. Whatever it is.
Well, just wait 2 or 3 until he's suddenly not the top paid quarterback, and then I think we go back to it.
Yeah,
But to your point, I actually really like Mahomes in terms of like I like what he's about. I like his swagger. Like I like him. It's a combo of the media chat, and also I think what will be interesting in the UK, for example, is there are for those listening overseas, it's just a bunch of Brady jerseys and Rodgers jerseys, and it's all glory sporting. And are we reaching a time now where the Chiefs have been relevant enough for 3, 4, 5 years that actually we're gonna be surrounded by Chiefs fans everywhere? Because that's not the case. Like, not many people really cared about the Chiefs 5 years ago, right? So,
No.
And
then
a
it will become
historic
more
team as well. It's not
Yeah.
like the Chiefs haven't had success over the last 40 years with Montana going there and having some success, and they've not been a nothing side. So yeah, everyone who's a Kansas City Chiefs fan over here is doing it for the love of the team. There's no glory hunting there, I don't think. And I think the same with the Eagles fans as well. They're cyclical, so they can't go on a run of domination, but their fans stick around. So
Well, that 2015 Super Bowl was their first ever, wasn't it? They'd never won it before, so I think this is only the
17?
50. Oh, what did I say?
yeah, it must be about 17.
I think
17 or 18.
I thought it was a little before that.
Because I think that was Doug Peterson's first season as Philly coach.
Was it? Anywho, they've not had much success before that, and they've not really had much since that. It was kind of a rapid decline, but I just really like the way their roster's been built and they've gone about everything. I mean, just some stupid deals to get players there. Like Gardner Johnson, it's like, how'd you pay day 3 picks for him?
It's madness.
It's daylight robbery, and that was because he was from the Saints, wasn't he? And that was this, and everyone goes, oh yeah, the Saints and their cap, well, they cap geniuses and that. They can't afford to pay players like him. That's why they're offloading them for cheap, so they can get the money off the books. That's the problem with the Saints.
I mean,
the Saints are in such a problem because they can't hit full reset. Like they're incapable of doing it. They're in a worse place than the Jeff Fisher Rams.
Exactly. You kind of have to wait 3 years deliberately been bad to clear all the cap just so you can start again, and they just keep rolling more and more back for every single season. And you think they lost Trey Hendrickson, they lost Marcus Williams, the safety, they lost Terod Armstead, they traded CJ away for nothing. It's like, well, yeah, they can get under the cap, but they're losing a hell of a lot of elite talent to do it. And you see him go there, and you're like, well, they've got Slay, they get Bradbury, who just gets cut. It's like, that's not really fair.
No.
They get Bradbury, who's cut, and they get him for 2 day 3 picks. It's like, who gets 2 high quality level starters for a combined 2 day 3 picks? You just don't.
Someone asked what the opening line was for the Super Bowl. The Eagles are
2.5
by 1.5 according to Betfair.
Really?
2.5 elsewhere.
Well, I saw Chiefs as 2.5 point favorites.
I got Eagles as 1.5 point favorites, and I'm considering taking 1.5 point favorite Eagles.
Ooh.
In fact,
I'm surprised they're the favorites, to be honest. But yeah,
I'm considering taking the Eagles minus like 10. I really fancy the Eagles heavily.
I do, because their trenches are just so much better than Kansas's, and I think it will wreck them. You saw how the Bucs did it in the Super Bowl a couple of years back. It was the front seven, the defensive front seven, that won them that game. And I see the same happening with Phillies here. Kansas City, it's just Mahomes supernatural in what he can do, but he's hurt. He was playing hurt, and they didn't hit him very often. The Eagles will. They'll hit him often. They will hit him frequently. They will make him feel really uncomfortable and probably injure him further. So I think
meet Hassan Reddick.
Well, not if you're using a second string tight end to I mean, what goes through someone's Hassan Reddick's one of their best pass rushers. Oh, let's stick the backup tight end on him. Let's stick a tight end on him. Let's stick a wide receiver on him. It's like, what goes into that thought process?
The thing is, you'd be better off leaving him unblocked and knowing that you're doing that and dealing with it, as opposed to thinking that you might have it blocked by someone who's not very good.
Yeah.
Like, leave him unblocked and run it the other way. But
yeah.
Shall we... Oh, hang on. Have some alerts. No. Okay, that's cool. Shall we get the show on the road? Ooh.
Hey.
Yes. Let's get the show on the road.
Are we doing grades for each of the draft picks? We can, yeah?
The Pistons grades would be pretty rubbish, Tom, in fairness, so... I know you disagree with me in terms of where they're going, but I fear for them. I just think so many years of losing consistently is bad for them, and that loss to the Thunder the other day was... Ooh. They rested their best 3 players, and they're the worst team in the NBA.
The what's it called, the Rockets game was as bad as it gets. So, there's some not good in there, but there's also, if you break it down individually, there is some progress this year. But yeah, we need to get one of those top 2 players basically in the draft. That same old Detroit story. Anyway, sorry about it.
Right, let's go for it.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to another edition of the Roar of the Lions UK podcast, episode 177. It's elementary, my dear homes. My name's Matthew Turner, alongside Ant and Tom. How you doing, boys?
Yeah, doing very well, thank you. Just, dissecting the games that have gone on over the weekend. It was disappointing considering what I was expecting, and my soccer team over here got thumped. So it's not been a great sporting weekend, especially with the Lions not been around. It just makes it worse. I missed them already.
And I know you were watching the AFC game live, but as someone who didn't, just to get that 49ers Eagles game as your only championship game was not great. I'll be honest. It wasn't the best watch I've ever had.
No, I bet on the 49ers Bengals Super Bowl, and it's just like I cursed the pair of them. But the 49ers, it was through. I mean, you can see why Josh Johnson's had 14 teams in his career, and been cut by them all, and will probably get cut by a 15th very soon. It was not pretty, but
I did a coaching clinic with Josh Johnson once, and he was a fantastic guy. So I will have no Josh Johnson slander in this podcast.
I hate to say this, but generally the journeymen who aren't very good are always the best type of humans, or like the best analysts. Think our own Dan Orlovsky. He's probably one of the better analysts out there, but couldn't throw a ball to save his life whilst he was on the field with us. So
what do you mean? The guy was Twinkle Toes. Come on.
I was gonna say
Twinkle Toes out of bounds.
Yeah,
all
right.
of it. So it just seems to be the way that the bad ones seem to do better on television. Unless you call Greg Olsen. I must admit, I really admire the hell out of him at the minute. He calls a really good game, and he was really good as well. So
yeah, right. Let me get started with the preamble, and then we'll get on to the news, and then look at the 2022 draft class, followed by Brad Holmes himself. Just want to let you know about our Discord channel. Please do go and join us there. We've got lots of draft content, which is going to be working its way up until the draft, which is just under 3 months away. College football podcast, and I know perhaps the status for this week is, well, I mean, the Senior Bowl's happening, so I'm hoping that we're doing something, but I know Ryan may not be on the show on Wednesday.
yeah, something will be happening. We've done the Senior Bowl roster reviews already, so we're looking at the Shrine Bowl this week. Not as in depth because a lot of the players down there will go and play in the CFL and XFL and stuff like that. But we're compiling together lists of our favorite players who we're looking forward to seeing. So yeah, it'll be kind of Shrine Bowl related, and then maybe just general chatter because we don't really do that very often. So yeah, but it'll be on for sure.
Please don't forget to like the show, sub to the podcast, rate, review, 5 stars, all that good stuff. It really helps us out. And don't forget to download the app at lionsnationunite.com. It's Herman Moore's project to bring the best in Lions content creators together. We're there. Micro Mike's there. Lions on the Prowl and Dose of Dion and all those guys. It's the best place to go and find your Lions content. And we are a Twitch affiliate. If you have Amazon Prime, you get a free sub to use each month. Puts about $2.50 in our pocket if you can shove it our way, or any of the other guys out there in this space. We would really appreciate you just using it at all. So please do. And there's also a feedback form on the YouTube video down below in the description. If you've got any thoughts about the show, any thoughts about upcoming content that you'd like to see, please do go ahead and use that. And there's also a tip jar as well if you feel so inclined. Just to let you know as well, we are 212 subs away from 1,000 on YouTube, which would be a huge thing for us if we can get there. So if you're not subbed already, we would appreciate that very, very much. And I know that our own Ryan McCluskey has got some giveaways planned for 900 and 1,000 subs. I actually need to get the tweets out on exactly what's included there, but you need to be subbed to the YouTube channel to be eligible for those giveaways. One of them is a signed helmet, so go ahead and do that because it's going to be worth it. Let's crack on with some news, and the first is a couple of shortlists for awards, end of season awards. First up, Aiden Hutchinson for Defensive Rookie of the Year. They're down to the last 3, and Ben Johnson is also shortlisted for Assistant Coach of the Year. And as everyone's pointing out in the chat, yes, karaoke at 1,000 as well might might happen. So that's just another thing there for you. Good news,
Look what
boys.
you did.
It's not.
Look what you did.
Tom Wilkinson.
My
Why?
bad.
Damn you. Lions players and coaches getting recognised, and also Pro Bowl players too. So Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown were first alternates, but with the Eagles making the Super Bowl, they are in now, boys. So Lions getting accolades all around.
Yeah, I mean, the Pro Bowl is the Pro Bowl. You get in by default. I mean, yeah, whatever. Hutch been up really good, but of course we all know the media is so far up Sauce Gardner's arse that they will never be able to dislodge themselves from it. So that's never going to happen. But it's great that he's in there. He's had a wonderful season, and he expects. And any other year he probably would get it, quite frankly. And but Ben, yeah, we all know what a great season Ben's had in terms of how this offense has developed, how great it's been all year. So yeah, it is great to see them getting recognized, but it still doesn't feel like we've been taken seriously to this point yet. So hopefully next year we get we get nominations and they mean it and we start winning things.
And it's hard to say someone like D'Amico Ryans doesn't deserve that award too, but I think you're exactly right. I mean, if Ben Johnson wins it, I think he'd be thoroughly deserving. I feel like the 49ers are a bigger team. It wouldn't surprise me if Ryan's got that as the assistant coach of the year. But yeah, it's quite cool. And it's always nice we're going to talk about Brad Holmes later, but his first draft class and year 2, he's got 2 Pro Bowlers. I agree. I mean, the Pro Bowl is a little bit of a joke. I think Roger Saffold got in, and the Cover One guys who do an awesome job covering the Bills, like they had him as the biggest disappointment of the year for that team. So it's like the Pro Bowl is a little bit of a popularity contest and a bit of a joke at times, but still really cool that we've got players in the mix after the last few.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the players Ben's had to work with. D'Amico Ryans, he's had elite players to work with at San Fran. They just have an elite defense at 3 levels, and it's not taking away the job that he's doing, but you have the talent to work with there. Here, Ben Johnson's worked with Goff, who everyone loves to criticize for being a mid to lower range, NFL quarterback all the time, and has made him a top 10 guy this season. A running back room that before the season wasn't getting talked about. Wide receiver core outside of Amon-Ra was not getting talked about. And yeah, the offensive line's good, but all the skilled players around it, there was no chat there, and he's made it one of the best offenses in the league. So you think in terms of talent you've had to work with and job you've done, he should outright probably win it.
All right. Moving on, the Lions have hired a coach. They've hired tight ends coach Steve Hayden, and there are rumours amok that the person that we thought might be the next offensive coordinator of the Lions if Ben Johnson was on his way might actually be a man on the move with Tanner Engstrand. Well, I mean, someone's being hired for his role, so he's either being promoted, moving sideways, or moving on, boys.
I don't know. I don't know anything about the new dude, so I can't really add much to this. Aside of apparently they've been after him for a long time, so this doesn't feel like a forced hire. It feels like something that maybe have been in the work for a while.
I wish I'd got in there first because I was literally going to hand it to you saying I have no idea anything about this guy. But I did see something similar that in terms of they've been after him for a while. I saw Eric Schlitt mention that Tanner Engstrand, there's murmurings about him potentially joining Jim Harbaugh, which would be interesting.
Yeah, starting his career with Jim as a coach, I think. I'm just reading his Wikipedia now. He played for the San Diego Chargers and then the Cleveland Browns for 8 years. And then he's been as a coach with the Cardinals all the way through from 13 to 23. So it's been there a long time. So,
and if you've been with the Chargers and the Browns for your career, then you understand misery. So,
Well, it seems odd, our director of college scouting's just gone over there, and then this guy's coming back in the opposite direction. I don't know, maybe you wonder, has some sort of deal been struck with them to sort of have a few people move around here and there? It does seem more than a coincidence that these two moves happen so close to one another.
Off the field trade, I love that.
Maybe. I mean, he's been, our guy had been with us a long time as well. So, 2 long established members moving somewhere else. Who knows? They say, I don't know if I feel like Tanner might still be a guy here. You never know what they'll do, what positions open up.
Is assistant offensive coordinator a thing? That's basically
You
pass
can do
coordinator, right?
you can do co-OCs like you do in college, but that never ends out well, really.
And also, I don't think Ben Johnson's going to take a pay rise and go, yeah, I'll share the job. That's not going to happen. But we'll see. We shall see. Someone's just asked about this, and so I'll get this in now. Salary cap level has been moved to $224.8 million for next season. We have a specific show next week on the salary cap and what it means for the team. So I'm just going to mention it here and invite you all to listen to that show next week for more discussion on what that means for the team. I'll end that there. Senior Bowl week starts tomorrow, and the game itself is on Saturday, February the 4th. We do have virtual credentials, so hopefully that means that we get to see a good amount of tape that's not available nationally, which means hopefully we should be bringing you some good stuff after the event. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of good coverage from some of our guys like Detroit Lions podcast. Also, the Draft Network are going to be there, so there's lots of good stuff going on through it. If you want to learn more about the people on both sides of the ball, then Ant and Ryan have had a really good couple of shows over the last couple of weeks on the College Football Podcast. Anything else you want to add on the Senior Bowl, Ryan?
No, just that I'm really looking forward to it this year. I think in terms of talent that's already, established and they're real big players, there's not a great deal this year. I think a lot of players go in have a lot to prove this season, and there's a lot I'm really looking for. I've got a list of about 20 who I'm really looking forward to seeing. So no, it's going to be very interesting. We'll see who Dion gets to coach. See if he gets some inroads there, maybe to some potential talent. But I've looked at most of the guys now. Most of them I'm quite excited to see. Some I'm very disappointed with, but again, that's what the week's all about. We'll see, and hopefully we get some good footage to go through.
And finally, I just got in here, Conference Championship chat. I know we alluded to it at the top of the show. We were talking about it actually before the show started. If you're on the audio show, if you're on YouTube, you heard us chat all about it. But I just kind of want to get this in here. People were kind of saying, oh, it was a shame that San Francisco couldn't, put up a bit more of a fight, but shame about what happened to Brock Purdy in the arm. The Eagles absolutely dominated the game, irrespective of what happened at quarterback. Like, on both sides of the ball, especially on the offense and defensive lines, they were utterly dominant. If Brock Purdy was in, if Mahomes was in, I think the Eagles win that game. They were just dominant from start to finish for me, boys.
Well, before the injury, you had one Philly drive and a couple of passes of a San Francisco drive. So, yeah, they look dominant, but it's a very small sample size to use before the injury occurs. Although I would just like to ask a question to you both. Do you know on the Philly defense who got the third highest grade on that team with a grade of 91 in an NFC championship game?
Is it an ex-Lion?
No. It's an ex-draft crush of mine who everyone laughed at me at for saying. And
is it your boy Reed?
My boy Reed. He got himself a 91. I think he played like 10 snaps, but he also did special teams. He had work on there as well. But oh man, I hate the Eagles, but I love him. He's had a really good season. He's been getting more and more snaps each week. I said this time last year, everyone goes, "Oh, he's going to be an undrafted free agent." I'm like, this guy's special. He is. He's had injury issues, but he will contribute for you on special teams. He will work his way in the team, and he has. And I'm very proud of him.
We'll come on to Kirby Joseph in a minute. There are 9 rookie safeties, of which Kirby's among them. Obviously, Reed is as well. Do you want to know where PFF have put Reed in terms of rookie safeties, where he's ranked?
Go on.
Out of 9. He's not 1. I'll let you in on that. He's number 2.
5?
He's number 2.
Really?
Yeah.
He was. Yeah. I didn't get why everyone was like, no one talked about him. It was special. I only had to watch his Middle Tennessee tape to see how good he was, and I think it was one bad injury that really hindered him with it. And plus, again, a little bit smaller. But watch the college. Height is not a thing at the next level. You can tell if a player, if his height's not going to bother him at the next level. You just can. You tell with Emrod. You tell with Reed. Same with Bryce this year. Everyone's going to knock his hype going up to the draft, but it won't be an issue for him. But I'm
It's
just
part
really
of the
happy
full
for Reed.
evaluation, isn't it? Because the
I'm just,
same
yeah,
knock was made on Ardarius Washington. He went as a UDFA when he was meant to be ranked in the 3rd round, and he
Yeah.
hasn't done much so far. So
No.
it's not like height isn't a thing. It's just a part of the evaluation.
It's as I always say, it's about finding the outliers. You know, you've always got to give everyone a fair shot and forget the outliers. Now, you might very well come to the conclusion that everyone else does and that's always right, but in some cases, you have to. But I just want to say I was very proud of this one because everyone likes to rag on my safety crushes, Richie Grant, Reed, etc.
And how Richie Grant's come on this year.
Yeah, Richie's doing much better at Atlanta, and I still hate the Falcons for taking him. So yeah, it's I don't know, just have a draft crochet. But I just wanted to say congratulations to Reed because it's like, yeah, you proved me right. You made me. I don't talk out my arse all the time. A lot of the time, but not all of the time.
Someone was saying in the previous show that my microphone was a bit quiet. So just for you guys that are on the stream, the guys here won't be able to tell, but I've just turned it up. If someone in the chat can just tell me if it's too much, then let me know. That'd be great. All right, let's move it on to talk about the draft class of 2022 for the Detroit Lions. And we'll start it off with the first round pick for the Lions, number 2 overall, Aiden Hutchinson from the University of Michigan. Number 1 consensus player on the board. He had 953 snaps. That was the 2nd all-time number of snaps that a rookie defensive lineman has ever had. 3 interceptions, 9.5 sacks. That's number 1 among rookies. 52 tackles, 34 solo, 9 tackles for loss, 15 quarterback hits, PFF grade 80.7. That's the top mark overall on Detroit, both sides of the ball. He started solidly, unremarkably, I think we would all say, winning reps but over pursuing, and showed massive growth all the way through the season to the point where I don't have any question marks about Aiden. The only question mark I have is how could he get?
Yeah, look, he had a really good year. Like Sauce Gardner, we've had that debate lots of times, but it was a rookie of the year level performance from Hutch. I think you mention it there, and it's important to remember that first half of the season, I think some of the stats were there. Like if you just looked at the box score, he was a few sacks, obviously a couple picks and things early, but watching the tape, there were things which were a bit frustrating. Is he winning when he's rushing the passer, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second part of the year was just awesome. So I think we leave the year now with very few questions about him, knowing he's a solid piece. I still question whether he can be a top 10 edge in the league. Well, no, sorry, he definitely can be. I don't know if he's ever going to get there as such, like a top 5, top 10 guy, but he's going to be there or thereabouts for a long, long time.
Well, I mean, who would be like top 10 in the league? Who would be 10? If you're what sort of territory are you in then? I guess you've got your elite guys, but I don't know. I'm just thinking out the top of my head. Who would be like in the 10 area?
Maybe
are we talking
5 to 10?
Reddick? Are we talking Hassan Reddick?
No, Reddick ain't up there.
I think as a pure pass rusher, maybe, but he's not one of the guys that comes to mind.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe more like Trey Hendrickson, someone like that. Maybe Max Crosby is just about in that 5 mark, maybe 5 to 10. I don't know. I don't think he's ever going to be in just because of tools and things. I don't think he's ever going to be in the Myles Garrett style because he's not that complete freak. And that's not to say Myles Garrett is always the best player that steps on the field. I think he's actually the last couple of years been, well, last year, a little disappointing because I expect him to be the best edge in the league every year. But yeah, I feel like if Hutch could have a rookie contract like a Trey Hendrickson, like a Max Crosby, then that is absolutely incredible from my angle. That's like the ceiling, I guess, that I would love to see over the next 3-4 years.
Yeah, so when it comes to this pick, they talked about Reed before, good valuations on players and that. This time last year, I was in on Hamilton at 2. I've never been ashamed to admit at that point, and I was very vociferous about it, and I still would be to this day, because I wasn't sure about the edge class in general. I thought, like Tom, for me, they all had their issues, that maybe 2 was a little too rich, if you weren't getting that sort of Miles Garrett guy. But at the end of the day, I'm very glad he's a Detroit Lion. As soon as they're drafted, they're one of us. You back them to the hilt, and he's had an incredibly good season. It started rough, but you've got to remember he's entering a unit that was badly lacking on resources. We had guys who were injured. Romeo was injured. Charles Harris was injured. Levi injured. So many injuries on that defensive line, and he's got to come in and make an immediate impact to try and upgrade it. And he had the Washington game, which was great. There was a bit of a struggle after that, trying to get adapted to the league, double team massively so. It's really weird how teams went after him so much, more so than anyone else in the league. He got double teamed, but he seemed to figure it out as he goes along. And they're the guys that Campbell and Holmes really go after and draft, the ones that are relentless in their search to better themselves. And no matter how hard a situation gets, they'll find a way out of it. It feels like that with Hutch. It feels like no matter how hard a situation becomes for him, how hard an opposition tries to stymie him, he always seems to find an answer and make impact plays on a game. And you've seen the improvements in his game as the season's gone on, setting the edge, not being too overzealous with the pass rushing, been a little bit more clever with how he plays, drawing holds, all bits like that. And you've seen this develop as the season's gone on, and he's obviously a lot of sacks on there. Top rookie sack maker in the league. The rest have not even really gotten close to him. So the pick has been great. He's a culture fit for us. He's a character fit for us, which is, I think, again, is a big thing for Holmes and Campbell. I think it's more about the attitude than it is about the talent in a lot of cases with the guys they draft. And you sort of saw it this year. He's part of the new gritty Detroit team we've got. He will lead it going forward, and hopefully we keep on funneling assets in there, giving him help, giving him more opportunities to make plays. But as far as his first season's gone, I don't think you could have asked for a lot more. I think he was like the team in general, sort of showed a flash of potential at the start, hit up on hard times, then dragged himself out of hard times and really ended the season on a high. So I can't ask any more than what we got from him this season. And hopefully he carries on developing at this rate next year. There's big expectations for this draft class now. They've achieved so much in year 1. The big question now is, can they carry this into year 2? So, more so, the lights are going to be on him next year.
Let me add some context to that top 10 debate, just to run down PFF's top 10. Just to throw some names out there. Myles Garrett 1, Micah Parsons 2, Nick Bosa 3, Max Crosby 4, Brandon Graham joint 4th as well, Jaden Phillips 6, Danielle Hunter at 7, Montez Sweat at 8, Hassan Reddick at 9, Von Miller at 10. Hutchinson finished 21st, but 19th was TJ Watt. So yeah, those are some names that you want him to kind of hang around.
Yeah, definitely. And I was doing a similar exercise there, and I was trying to think, because PFF you quite often get, I mean, like this random guy Reed Blankenship is graded well, so like you can't always trust it. No, I was looking on actually Madden ratings, because whilst that's a popularity contest to some extent, I think they probably go with some of the big names as their highest rated players. And yeah, it was Garrett, Bosa, Parsons, Crosby, Watt. And then the next 5, Von Miller. I'm leaving Cameron Hayward out because he's more of a kind of 5-tech, but Von Miller, Joey Bosa, DeMarcus Lawrence, Matt Judon, Hassan Reddick, Brian Burns. Like, I think it's that group that's that's where the realistic, or not realistic, but that's where I think his ceiling could be, is definitely in and around those players. Will he ever be a Bosa brother or Garrett? Probably not. But could he have seasons where he outperforms those guys? Definitely. So I think, that kind of range, Hendrickson range would be, we've based on the information we've got so far, there is no reason to think he couldn't get to that level, which is incredible, right?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll move on to our second player in round 1, wide receiver Jameson Williams from Alabama. In a trade, we went from 32, 34, and 66 to 12 and 46. He was taken at 12. He was the number 10 consensus player overall. Played in 6 games, took 78 snaps, 1 carry for 40 yards, 1 catch for 41 yards and a touchdown, 63.4 PFF grade. It took longer than we hoped for him to come back. He was potentially healthier and ready to go earlier than when he was introduced. And then when he was introduced, maybe we all saw why he wasn't being introduced. And that's not on him. He's injured, and it was always a bit of a write-off season anyway. That said, I think the first touchdown he gets, the lob ball to him, that speed really electrified the fans and thought that we were going to be getting something special that might take us to new heights. And it didn't quite materialize, and it's something I think you've got to hope that does kind of come together in the off season. And to be honest, it's on Goff now in this off season and the two of them to really build that rapport that's clearly lacking, boys.
I don't know. I think people have very short memories because they forget how long it took Goff and Amon-Ra to get on tape with one another. It took Amon-Ra over half a season until him and Goff really started clicking together. And that is sometimes the time it takes with a wide receiver. Everyone expects them to just come in and make magic together. It does not happen that way. Especially Goff never had anyone to throw to like Jameson his time here or his back end days at the Rams either. So he's got literal such game-breaking speed. But you saw in spurts what he's capable of. And, I said at the time, and I'm still now, there is no one I've been more excited to see play for the Lions in the last decade. Not since Sue. That's just how much I am looking forward to seeing him play. And the glimpses of good I've seen, it's exactly what we hoped for. Just that game-breaking speed is there. That ability to use him in the backfield, in motion, stuff there. It is all there. He is the ability to be a game-breaker here. And, it was just a bit too late in the season. And, especially with Goff, it takes time for him to get trust and get rapport going with his receivers. So I'm not worried in the slightest. And I think, if people are, they're just pushing the panic button too far. It's just like I say, remember Amon-Ra, those two, it's like a psychic connection now between the pair of them. But there was a day and an age where he didn't even target him, didn't even look at him. It comes in time. But, the trade was good. It was a player we really needed, a wide receiver we really needed. And we always kind of knew that year one was going to be more of a write-off than a success. So, I'm more than willing to wait well into next year till we start making any big sort of statements about what's gone on with him.
Yeah, it's almost like it would be, how would you actually grade it? Because that he was only out there. Yes, I know he played, I guess, almost a third of the season technically, but he was on a snap count. I don't think you could really judge too much from, or kind of backing up what you say, Anne. I think if you are reading too much into this season, you're doing it wrong. The only thing is, I was amazed when I watched him last year when we were doing our, I guess, scouting reports and things like that. Knew he was a speed guy, had watched highlights, etc. But there was a pretty impressive amount of polish on his game for a guy who was a transfer as well. So initially I went in with the impression that he was going to be all speed, all athlete, but pretty raw. And there was a lot more polish to his route running, to his tempo than I was expecting. And we didn't really see much of that this year. And there was a couple drops in there, and drops weren't really upon him in college. So I'm not worried about it. At the same time, it would have been nice to see a little bit more, but it is what it is. I'm like I say, I think this time next year we will have a pretty good idea of who he is and isn't. But right now it's just impossible to give a grade like you could to a Hutch or something. A- for what it's worth.
Yes, sorry, we didn't do grades, did we? So Hutchinson and
Hutch was an A.
yeah, I mean the thing is, you can feel a bit worse about a pick, but you can only judge it by what the opportunity cost was. He's the best player on the board. A. Like, he's the best rookie defensive lineman there was this season, and there was no quarterback worth taking. It's an A. Jameson, yeah, TBD. I'm just not gonna. T is not a grade, but TBD is a grade.
Put it this way, if it was Malik Willis we took it, it'd be oh, Jesus, that was bad.
Yeah, is that the moment when you
I'm
find
sorry,
out
Pod took shots at us last week, so I'm taking shots back this week.
Yeah, they really went in.
They were nasty. I had a tear in my eye by the time I was done.
Yeah, no, I got a bone to pick with Ryan. I got to admit, we got Jeremy on the show on Thursday, so you know.
The country that brings to the world cheese in a can, and they haven't the audacity to critique our food tastes. That's like you don't get a say on the matter with that sort of stuff. Sorry.
Hey, they're doubling down too. I don't know if you saw Ryan's tweet yesterday or the day before, just with a really bad looking set of chips, beans, etc. So, hey, I
did
mean,
not.
who doesn't love a war? I mean, you know, let's get that going.
Culture war. They started it as well, so we will finish it.
Anyway, moving on from the no grade Jameson Williams as yet to the second pick. So the first pick in the second round, 46 overall, got this pick in the trade for Jameson. And we took the defensive end Josh Pascal from Kentucky. 46th overall, was 81 on the consensus board. Played in 10 games, 293 snaps a season, kind of with injury issues, which was unfortunate. He got 2 sacks, 16 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits, PFF grade of 55.1. And I mean, I think the injuries really took away from him what could have been a really good season, because despite that grade, when I saw him at his best, when he kind of built up a head of steam, it was a bit of a rocky start. When he built up a head of steam just before his injury, he looked like he was being an absolute beast inside, especially with the run defense and the pass rushing was coming on. And the injury kind of really took away from that progress. And then when he came back, he didn't really quite look like the same guy, and actually ended up losing his place a little bit to Houston and Kaminsky. But I think for me, I saw enough promise there to say that I am hopeful that that pick will materialize in a good way. But I think coming in with it being potentially a small reach, I wouldn't say it's a big reach, but I think it was a small reach. The big gap between picks didn't help, because it kind of felt like you might have to take the guy you would want ideally a few picks later. That maybe with a reach, I wanted to see a little bit more production than I saw, and it was just bad luck.
I mean, I wasn't happy with this one at the time. I've still got his scouting page. I think it's on one of my notepads in my bedroom. I think it's top page, because I had it out again. I wasn't happy with the pick, because again, I felt like it was a reach. I noted the pass rush Arsenal was not developed. He was like, he had the same issues that I had with Kayvon. There wasn't a lot of variation when it came to the pass rush. There were a lot of times that, he'd be out, he would be outpowered on moves. He would be ineffective. And he had some issues whilst flashing raw potential. And I just thought there were better options at the time. I think, I was big on Travis Jones. I think I wanted the line, but not an edge. But saying that, when you see what you see on the field this season from him, I saw what was in my notebook. It was, flashes of potential brilliance and doing really well, mixed in with a lot of could do a lot better. And I know when we drafted him, I said, this is going to be a long-term project. This ain't going to be a guy who's starting from the second round, just because of how underdeveloped some aspects of the game are. But, if we're grading on these, then he's kind of been exactly what I expected him to be. And yes, the injuries have been a pain, which has not helped. And going forward, I think you'll start seeing the real best of him when you get to year 3, when he's got a lot more experience under his belt and he's had the chance to develop his game a lot more. But like I say, when he's good, and when you saw those flashes, you saw why they thought so highly of him. So I'm still kind of, the jury's out on this one, because we need to see him play more. We need to see him play healthy. And he's kind of just been exactly what my scouting report said he would be. So, I can't have any arguments with that, really. That's what we were going to get. That's what we got.
It's quite an interesting theme, though, because I think you've got these top 10 to 15 players each draft cycle, right? And then normally 20 to 50, 20 to 60, there's a lot of similar guys in terms of grades, and it's a little bit more, let's say, lucky dip in terms of you get guys who you think are reaches, got other guys fall, etc. And with Holmes, who we're going to talk about at the end, and I think overall will be pretty positive, but the two, I guess, his guys are really Levi, and I'm taking a lot of this from his interviews afterwards and the talk about really wanting to go get someone. He talked about that with Levi, and he talked about that with Pascal too. Afterwards, he was hinting that he would firmly have been in play at 32, 34. And yeah, I mean, we didn't see too much. I mean, for Pascal to stay on the field and get a lot of reps, he's really got to show consistency. And we didn't get that this year. There were some flashes, but I think they had in mind a guy who is versatile and they can plug in a variety of different alignments, but really not to be a star himself, to try and free up the other guys, whether it's McNeil inside, Hutch on the other side of the formation, obviously Houston now as well. I don't think they're expecting Pascal to turn into a 12-sack guy, but he has to do his job and therefore free the other guys up to do theirs. And there was a lot of inconsistency this year. Again, another rookie season which was hampered by injury, so I'm not massively worried. And I was probably relatively high on Pascal, to be honest, coming in. So it was, I think, inconsistent, as you mentioned, and was really the summary. And that's just got to tighten up. I don't need him to be a superstar, but I need him to put good reps out there and just not get beat.
I think the biggest thing for me is if you told me that he was the 81st player overall, I kind of go, yeah, seems about right. Mid to late third round. Sure, a guy that you're not going to rely on straight away. You're telling me that he's the 46th overall pick? Like, and you said, and it translated straight into the pros, flashes, some good stuff, some not so great stuff. Can he learn? Can he develop? I think he can, because I think we saw it at the beginning of the season that he did get a lot better through it, but that injury really set him back, so I have to hope that he can get back to that place. But if you have a look at the development of this defensive line, I have to hope that it's going to be possible.
So, yeah, so when I argue against Brad Holmes being a BPA player, which a lot of people say he is, I point to examples like this of why I don't believe he's that sort of guy because, Pascal kind of had an inspiring story coming out of school. Again, I'm looking towards the personality. I'm looking towards the guy. I'm looking towards the work ethic more than I'm looking at the natural bona fide talent in there with him. And for me, that would be what has sort of swayed them because, as a guy, he's really great. And like I say, he's overcome a lot. He works hard. I'll never say anything about his work ethic or his work rate. It's just that level of talent to take you up and above and really make you stand out as a 42nd overall pick. And I don't know if it's there, but this is the prime example I'd use. I think Holmes and Campbell, for that matter, really value personality and they really value work ethic over talent. So, if we graded it, I'd grade him at a C because for me, he has not surpassed my expectations and he has not underachieved towards my expectations. I think I've seen from him exactly what I thought I was going to. Hopefully, with year 2, the injury is now behind him, get a full off season of reps in, work with Hutch. If Romeo's back working, they can sort of get something going. And then next year we can really see a bit of a breakout in terms of that. So yeah, it's a C for me. It's solid.
For me, it'd probably be a C minus, only because I maybe had slightly higher expectations, but also, and look, it's not the guy's fault, but you've got to be on the field and he wasn't. So I think if C is our passing grade, then I'd have him just a notch lower. Again, I'm not hugely concerned about it, and year 2 will be big for him. But if we're talking just about this year, expectations immediately post draft, I think he was probably slightly below where I would have wanted.
I think if I go on to Brad Holmes later in terms of the pick, if I just grade the player himself, I'm kind of with Tom, C minus. But it kind of feels harsh to say that JMO is a no grade, not possible, and Pascal gets a grade and it's bad. Like, it feels slightly incongruent, but
JMO's, I think the severity of injury You know, JMO's coming off a really severe injury and one that has the potential to incredibly affect his game. You know, it's quite vital to him to need that up and working to do what he does. And sort of Pascal's had quite a few more reps in there. And we saw him have really good games. It was one of the blowouts. I think it was Jacksonville or New York where he was really damn good. So you think he had the ability in there, but again, it was the inconsistency of the play. But again, it's because of the injuries, because of where he is development wise. It's par to par. He couldn't really do a lot more, outside of what he did. So I say year 3, I think we'll see a really good player, but I'm gonna have to be really patient with him.
And he did have almost 4 times the snaps of Jameson. So Jameson was 78 and Pascal was a touch under 300. So we got to see enough, I would say.
Yeah,
that's fair. Right, let's move it on to the next pick, and we had to wait 51 long picks and then 80 after this one. So it was a barren time in the draft for the Lions after the trade up. But it did get exciting at number 97, that first comp pick in the 3rd round, with the selection of safety Kirby Joseph, the number 93 consensus player overall. Played in 17 games, 875 snaps, 4 interceptions on the season. That was joint 4th among rookie players in the class. 8 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery, 82 tackles, a quarterback hit, and a PFF grade of 64. I told you where Reed was out of 9. Where was Kirby?
Probably right at the top.
He was number 6 out of 9.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I assume Kyle Hamilton was top, but I would have thought he was 3 or 4, to be honest. I'm a bit surprised.
Yeah, Kyle Hamilton had like an 84 grade for the season overall. Like, he had a higher grade than Hutchinson for whatever that means. But yeah.
And the Ravens took him as well. Like, literally screw the Ravens for their draft class. It was like a smorgasbord of my favorite players.
Yeah, it's an interesting season for Kirby, though. The box score really doesn't do him justice, I don't think. And I don't think the PFF grade does either. I mean, there was a lot of good and there was a lot of bad. And that mediocre grade completely masked what was going on. We saw coverage busts. We saw him just completely taking the wrong guy altogether. Maybe looking a bit lost out there. He was never meant to start, though. And if you want to say it comes down to him being a rookie, he only had 1 year starting at Florida State. We all knew that he was going to be a bit lost out there. That's why he wasn't meant to start. Tracy Walker's injury means has to
Illinois.
come in. That's the one. Sorry, beg your pardon. Thank you very much. Just knew Ash was big on him for some reason. I said Florida State. Yes, Illinois. And he comes in a pinch. The interceptions are obviously big, and against who was quite big as well, emotionally. But I go back to him, and my prevailing thought about Kirby Joseph this season is the 2 forced fumbles that he had. Both of them massively impactful plays. You talk about, game-changing plays, and that one in particular was a catch and run and then a hit on the 5-yard line to prevent a touchdown. And then we go and score a touchdown off that turnover. And I can't remember who that was against. I think it was against Minnesota in week 3 when we lost. But for me, just surpassed expectations because we actually played to begin with. 875 snaps is not to be sniffed for a rookie. And for all there was the bad play here or there, I don't think he looked entirely out of place. I thought he looked like he belonged.
He was exactly kind of who we thought we were going to be in that regard. I agree. He wasn't meant to start this year. I think he was meant to work his way into the team. And you can see why. Like you said, with the inconsistencies, there are parts to the game that are nowhere near ready yet. And there are parts to the game where he's incredibly well developed. And, like we said with Pascal, he's had inconsistencies to his season. Like when he's played well, he's played at like a 7 out of 10, but then he's been inconsistent outside of that. Then with Kirby, you'd notch it up. You'd say he's been like a 9 out of 10 when he's been good, but there's also been a lot of inconsistency with it. So it's kind of a lot more noticeable because of the plays that he has made. And you've got to take into account he's in a a very barren safety room as well at the moment. Deshaun, this was really his first year as a starter, and he came on leaps and bounds. You know, to lose Tracy was really bad. Then you've just got guys like Brady Breeze and Juju Hughes and he who shall not be named playing at that position occasionally here and there. And Iffy coming back off a big injury, and he's not a safety, he's a corner. So the situation that he's been put in, the role that he's had to take on this early in his career, and you know the production that he's given us out of that, like I say, absolutely, he has 100% exceeded expectations for this season. He comes from a really good collegiate system. I'm pretty sure we're going to have one of his running buddies joining us this summer as well, which will be great. But I think you've got to be very careful with him year 2 now. You, like you said, there's a lot of inconsistencies on there. The busted coverages. There is a tackling issue sometimes. I know the forced fumbles are really good. We've got to be very careful not to get carried away. Like if next season he has like 1 interception, but he's steadily better at everything and he progresses as a player, that will represent a good year. Don't think that maybe because some of the bigger numbers have dropped or whatever that he's suddenly a bad player. We've got to keep our expectations in check with him. He is still going to be a second-year guy who has a lot to learn and has some way to go till he reaches his top potential. But if he carries on doing it the way he is, you know, you're kind of looking at a Quandre Diggs-esque rise here. We got him 5th round and he became a premier starter, and Kirby could do the same. He could be a premier starter very quickly who's going to, you know, get a good contract when he comes to the end of his rookie deal, and rightly so. So, we grade in year 1, so you can't grade it anything other than I think an A for what you've got for the when you take everything into account. I know the inconsistencies there, but the situation he's been put in, where we drafted him, the plays he's made, I think A is a very fair assessment for him, and it was a really good pick.
Yeah, I can't stretch to an A. Could probably go B plus, but I agree with pretty much everything you said. And the exciting thing about Joseph, and for I guess long-time listeners, safeties is the position that I have close to my heart. He did some things, and I can't say this about Hutch, to be honest. He did some things that made me think he can be the best safety in the league. Yeah, the pick when we did our awards last week, 2 weeks ago, can't remember. And we were talking about player of the year. I voted for his second pick against Rodgers in the first Packers game. And to be honest, I would have been tempted to vote for the play that didn't happen, the pick that got called back in the second Packers game, because some of that stuff is just so elite. You can't teach it. And whereas I was saying, and like I say, we don't need Hutch to be Myles Garrett, and I don't think he's necessarily going to be, and that's fine. Kirby literally showed things this year that made me think he could be the premier ball hawking safety in the league. Not to say he will be. And I think, and to your point, next year we're going to have to deal with similar inconsistencies. He hasn't really played with Tracy, and obviously they're going to ideally be the 2 split safeties. So I think we'll have another semi-inconsistent year. But man, the upside, like some of the things I saw this year was just incredible. So like personally, if we're talking about, again, like Seymour as a passing grade, I can't stretch to an A, but it was just so impressive, some of the things. So yes, there was inconsistencies. Yes, there was misses. Do I expect to see similar things next year? Yes. If he only gets 1 or 2 picks, but improves across the board in some of the other areas, I'll be delighted, because that playmaking ability doesn't disappear.
I'm going to split the difference. A- for me sounds about fair. I mean, honestly, with the safety room as it was, I thought he might have 200 snaps. So the fact that he's almost broken 1,000 and he's looked as he has and shown the ceiling that is possible there. I mean, he could have done slightly better, I guess. But, I mean, versus expectation, he's right up there with the people that have surpassed it. So A- for me feels eminently fair. Let's move it on to the next guy, and a long time later, from 97 down to 177, round 5, on the start of a great run by the Royal Alliance guys for predicting the pick, with tight end James Mitchell out of Virginia Tech. Picked at 177, was the 162nd consensus pick. Played in 14 games. He caught a perfect 11 for 11 for 113 yards and 1 touchdown, PFF grade of 66.9. We know that he came into the team injured from his college days, that kind of held him back a little bit, and then he did have a couple of niggles to start off the season as well, so that kind of hampered his chances of going in, I think, with meaningful reps from the start. But he played in 14 games, and yeah, he didn't play a huge amount of snaps. He was used sparingly in a tight end room that had a first round pick that was meant to be the guy, and then when he was traded, you had some guys that did really, really well in that room, like Shane Zylstra and Brock Wright. So he was fighting for snaps with guys who were fighting for snaps along with him. And he got in there, and when he was throwing the ball, he caught it, he turned it upfield, and he blocked bloody well for someone of his draft pedigree, 5th round tight end. We knew that he had the talent. We heard from and Ryan that he had the talent, but that he maybe needed a little bit of work. And I thought that he was particularly effective, boys.
Do you want to go first, Tom? I keep going first, so I feel bad.
That's all right. Sorry, I was muting myself. Yeah, I mean, he's another one which is probably on the brink of an incomplete grade. PFF don't have him listed against the tight ends because he obviously didn't qualify with enough snaps, but he was our highest ranked tight end. So he definitely did some good. Again, spoiler alert, I don't think I could give a grade as such just because he played under 200 snaps, but I think he showed a lot of what we expected coming in. I would have liked to seen a little bit more in the run game personally, but I didn't realize he was 11 for 11, for example. And I mean, it's tough to do better than that. So, yeah, it was I don't have a huge amount on Mitchell, to be honest. Like you say, I would have loved if he had a game or two where he was a featured player, so to speak, maybe had a few more snaps, but he was coming off he was an ACL as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was coming off an ACL injury, similar timeline, although obviously slightly ahead to JMO. They weren't going to put him out there for 40, 50 snaps. This is where someone tells me he maybe did do that, but I don't think he did. I think he was in like 20 some games, but often 5 or 10. So yeah, I don't have a huge amount to add on him. I think this year is a bit of a wash, and that's fine because that's why we got him in the 5th round. He was a higher ranked player. He was an injured player. And like I say, with him, JMO, even Pascal to some extent, you're expecting them to be year 2 and beyond.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it when we picked him. I think 2 years ago, before the start of his last college season with Virginia Tech, we highlighted him as the guy we really liked out of the tight end room there, and he had a good start to the season. The injury was really unfortunate, but a lot of people ragged on the pig. They said, what's he do well? But you've seen with the receiving stats, he was a really good receiving tight end at Virginia Tech. And when you've got a scrub like Braxton Burmeister throwing to you all the time, who is wildly inaccurate, the passes fit around all over the place, and he still made a lot of great receiving plays there. You just knew that when he came up with a better quarterback at the NFL level, he would be able to do something as a receiver. And you've seen this year, he can make plays as a receiver. And, Virginia Tech also ran the ball a lot. So the blocking skill was there. Yeah, it did need a little bit of work, but the ability for him to have an impact in both plays of the game was there, and you saw it, albeit in little moments this season, not like Tom says, maybe as broad a resume as you would like to have seen from him over the course of the season. But, I feel like he flashed his potential in both disciplines. Like you say, he was a really good blocker. As a receiver, he did everything he needed to when his number was called. The ACL was always going to hold him back, and obviously TJ is the feature back for the first half of the season, so he's going to take majority of snaps. And with Zylstra doing well, with other guys doing well, with Brock Wright doing well, I think they found like a nice rotation between the three of them where they've all been contributing in their own little way. And you got to forget, where he was picked in the draft, we got good value for him. He is much better than a 5th round player. And I think as you go into year 2 and you go into year 3 and they get more time with him and he gets more reps and he feels a bit more comfortable with how he plays, I think he will be number 1. He will be tight end number 1 on this team. soon enough. And I've seen enough to back my views I had on him from the season gone. I'm with Tom. I think it's more of an incomplete grade here. I mean, or maybe I might go to C again because he has not exceeded my expectations and he has not, disappointed against my expectations. I think I've seen what I wanted to see of him this year. I've seen in spurts that he can do what he wants to. We've just got to move him up a level now, get him some more snaps, see more regularly consistent good plays, and that comes in time. He's a day 3 guy, so I'm not expecting him to flash year 1 and be great straight away. But the progression I've seen from him, I'm very happy with. And I think over time we'll see that the pick was completely justified. He would have been a round 3 guy, but for that injury, maybe a little bit higher. And once we get him going, I think you will see that sort of guy come out.
I think for me, I can stretch to a C+, just because I think he probably played more snaps than I thought he might, just because I thought that Brock Wright was clearly tight end 2 with Hockenson clearly tight end 1. I thought he'd struggle to break into that rotation at all. And then we saw that Zylstra was very much in play for tight end 3 as well. So there was a point in time where I thought Mitchell was on the bubble for the 53. And, he ended up making it. Justin Zylstra didn't originally, I think. And then Zylstra got re-signed to the main roster later on. But I think in him, I saw someone who showed more promise than I thought I would see from him after coming off the ACL injury, and I saw the good things that he could do, and I didn't really see a lot of bad when he was on the field. I didn't see massive busts when it come to run blocking. I didn't see any drops. He didn't have enough snaps for me to say that I thought he did really great, but he just had a good rookie season considering everything that happened to him in the offseason. So C+, I think, is eminently fair. All right, let's move this on to who I'm going to call potentially the forgotten man. And it seems unbelievable to say that. But when you consider that the man really struggled for votes at all when it came to draftee, if there were rookie of the year or, surprise of the year or any sort of murmurings like that, the fact that a 6th round linebacker who starts the season and has an absolutely fantastic year, I think he ended up not regressing, but maybe his second half of the year wasn't quite as great as the first half of the year, and suddenly, not that people have soured on him, but just that he's become a little bit forgotten, and it's just mad to me. Number 188 in round 6 was the linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez from Oklahoma State. He was the 171st consensus player, played in 16 games, missed 1 late with injury, 2 passes defended, a forced fumble and a fumble recovery, a sack, 87 tackles, 8 tackles for a loss, 3 quarterback hits, PFF grade 63.9. He ended up starting for the team after a stellar camp. We all saw what happened in Hard Knocks with the linebackers coach just berating the room saying, "You're forcing me to play this rookie, you know that. You guys have to play better than this because I can't not play him forever." And lo and behold, he starts week 1, earns that job, really makes it his own, and shows up really early. When the Lions struggled on defense, he was the one bright spark we had. It was a shame for that defense that they couldn't show up when the rookies really, really did. And then when the rest of the team showed up, I think overshadowed him just a tiny, tiny little bit. But he was consistent pretty much all the way through the year, and I can only feel hopeful going into year 2 that he can do just as much in this coming season, boys.
And I think one of the reasons for that was, like I say, there was so much hype early, but also he wasn't spending as much time on the field by the end of the season. Derek Barnes was definitely having more of a role. I mean, I'm just looking down the snap counts now. And in the first 8 weeks of the season, he didn't have less than 46 snaps. After that, he didn't reach 46 snaps again. And in fact, the final game of the season, he had 18, his lowest. So you could look at that and say, oh, were they taking him off the field because he wasn't performing? Again, if you actually look at his PFF grades, they got better towards the back end of the year. But he just wasn't playing as many snaps, wasn't making as many plays as such. But when you're taking a guy in the 6th round with, let's be honest, very limited expectations, even though we know we didn't have a particularly talented linebacker core, to get over 600 snaps out of him to get the buzz and excitement as well. Yeah, it's hard not to, like I say, I think we forget how excited we were early in the season. And then suddenly, yes, Hutch comes around, Kirby does all these things, J-Mo's back, etc. So it's easy to forget about him, but he was doing a lot of good and he really shored up that room. If you don't have those snaps from him, then like what happens with that linebacker room?
I mean, Malcolm Rodriguez is the prime example of why you don't just judge a player out of college if you've never seen him before. I mean, everyone just went on about the height time and oh, he's too small, he won't succeed. It's rubbish. A lot of times, yes, that's the case, but you only have to watch one game of him in college to realize he was going to be a success at the next level. And this is another time where this is a Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes pick. I think if Dan Campbell could genetically engineer a son, I reckon Malcolm Rodriguez will probably be the end result, just because of how he plays, just the way he is. I mean, he came off. He was central leader on an Oklahoma State defense that just won the Big 12. He had an incredible season. He played with heart. He plays passion, and he can overcome the height. Height is only a problem if you let it be a problem. You see him with the wrestling background in school, extensive wrestling background. You can see how he works with leverage, how he works with momentum against much bigger guys. When he hip tossed, was it Kelsey? I think it was.
Jason Kelsey.
Jason Kelsey destroys the best defensive lineman in football on a weekly basis. Malcolm hip tossed him, and he is a much bigger man than he is. And you can see with the wrestling background, with his understanding of the game, he's incredibly clever, and with his just unrelentless work ethic, it was crazy how he dropped so far in the draft. Steve asked day 3 during the draft last year, who should you go for at linebacker today? Who's left? And when he said who's left, the second he said Amron's name, I'm like, Malcolm. Absolutely 100% go for Malcolm. He's the best guy left by a long shot. And how he fell that far just because of his height is a travesty. But it's a case of do your research, and you would have seen in one game that he would have no problem with this. And we said why. The biggest thing is the work ethic. You saw in camp right away. It took a matter of weeks before coaches were raving about his work ethic, about how he's coming to camp, how he's grinding, how he's impressing everybody. And then you start hearing murmurs from the coach like, wow, this guy might actually be sort of working his way into a starter role. Then during Hard Knocks, you see the progression. You mentioned the thing with Kelvin saying, look, I'm going to have to put him in the team if he doesn't keep going. And they said that was the reason that he was going to get in there. The special teams, I think he made the first special teams tackle of the season in the first game against the Eagles. He was the guy out there wanting to make the play. He was the one, and that's what you get with him. And when you have such just a raw passion for everything, and you do have the talent to do it, you will find a way to succeed. And you saw very early on, he was not fazed about going into these games. Yes, there were learning curves in there, and of course they are. It wasn't just the height why he went so late in there. There were little bits to his game he needs to work on. I mean, it's harder in the run game when the guys are bigger, stronger, but he's found a way to adapt into that system. And the pure snap count they gave him, as Tom said at the start, with 40 snaps a week, he might work his way into a green dot eventually if he keeps on going the way he is. And it's just been fantastic. And yes, the snaps dropped off towards the end of the year, but we do have to remember he injured his arm. I think it was on a quarterback's helmet. I can't remember who it was, but he injured his arm, and I know they had to reduce the playing time a little bit there. But even then, I think he's had a really good start. But even sometimes the best rookies, they have to step back a little bit. Even after initial success, they just have to keep them reined in, keep them progressing. Sometimes not overexpose them too much, especially if he is carrying a knock. But after everything you've seen from him this season, I'd struggle to think of another 6th round pick that was as good for his team this season. I don't think there is. And this is just the beginning. I think there's just so much more to his game. Once the consistency comes, once, he fine tunes a few of the little problems that he has, I think the sky is completely the limit for him. And I think, 6, 7, 8 years time, he's going to be here and he's going to be a cult hero by that point. So it was a wonderful pick. he was absolutely a Dan Campbell and a Brad Holmes type guy. You just knew that from the beginning. So it's an A star, I'd say. No, A star. No, I'm going to go A star. Screw it. I know the production went to the end of the year, but I think that was more injury related. But from what you've got, from where he was picked, and how well he has done in every single facet, off the field, on the field, development, it's just been top notch production from him. So one of the best picks of the draft, and we got incredibly lucky.
A star, definitely a British thing, but I assume A
Or
plus
an A
translates
plus,
as well.
an A,
So,
an
yeah.
A plus. No, damn it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say he's definitely a Dan Campbell guy. I was just looking. One of the big knocks on him, as well as height, was arm length. Right, his fourth
Yeah.
percentile when it comes to arm length for inside linebackers. And I was just scanning down the list, and the list of people with shorter or same length or shorter arms is an absolute wasteland. One name that I did recognize though was Troy Reader, who obviously was part of that Rams team who Brad Holmes drafted 3 or 4 years ago. So I think, yes, a Dan Campbell guy in terms of how he plays, but definitely a Brad Holmes guy in terms of someone who is overlooked, but he believes in him as a player, may not have the perfect measurables, and impresses. So yeah, I don't think I could stretch to A plus. Maybe I think I'm just a harsher marker, but in terms of what we expected coming into the season, A minus, I'd be more than happy with. He's one though that I'd probably, of some of the other grades we've given, I'm more excited to see, like, can Hutch do this? Can Kirby get to this? With Rodriguez, it wouldn't surprise me if he took a bit of a step back next year. And that's only because he's outperformed. And it's similar with the guy we're going to talk about next to some extent, but he's outperformed expectations for me personally so much that it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't set the world on fire next year. But yeah, 6th round pick, you can't really ask too much more.
Yeah, I'd go A. I mean, it's hard to argue with either of your grades for the reasons, but what 6th round rookie plays that much any position? It doesn't happen very often in the way he played. I mean, he was basically he was a captain on the team day one, like in spirit. That's who he is, and it was terrific to see, because without him, we maybe don't have the season that we have. We definitely don't have the season that we have. He was one of the saviors for us when it came to culture changes and keeping your head up at 1 and 6. I think he was right front and center of that. So, culture setter.
And right, also a compliment. Sorry, also a compliment to Barnes, right? As in, Barnes was sorry, was that what you were about to say? You hit it. You go on.
No. It's great minds talk. Go on.
Just because obviously Barnes, I was so excited watching Barnes in his rookie preseason, and let's be honest, we were all pretty disappointed with how that year turned out. But it took a lot of the pressure off Barnes and allowed him to some extent, be in the shadows that first half of the season, and that was fine. Like, players are then not getting on him. Fans, sorry. And then he really took a step forward the second half of the season. And I think when you look at how Rodriguez plays and how Barnes play, they complement each other pretty nicely as well. So it definitely gives hope that young linebacker partnership might be there over the next year or two.
So, yeah, I was basically about to say the same thing. So great minds alike and all, but I was going to expand a little further on that. And I think the emergence of Rodriguez at the start of the season, easing the pressure on Barnes so that he emerged more towards the end of the season. I think the pair of them doing that, it's no coincidence that Alex Anzalone got better as the season went on. Now that he's in a room where he has competent guys in there with him, no more Jamie Collinses, no more like this. I think those two certainly taking a lot of the pressure off him resulted in a big upturn of form for Anzalone as well. So maybe we've stumbled on a good 3 with these guys.
Let's move on to the next pick, and one that probably has the Lions fans absolutely just wet with excitement. James Houston, 217th overall in round 6, from Jackson State via, I want to say, Miami. Was it Miami? Florida. Same thing.
Oh dear.
Sorry,
there is a part of the world which, if they heard that, you would not be welcome there anymore.
There was a reason why I started laughing almost as I was
You'd be on a hit list.
Yeah. I know it. Taken at 217 was the, and I'll say this slowly, 457th ranked player on the consensus board. Played in 7 games, played 140 snaps, had a forced fumble and a fumble recovery, 8 sacks, second amongst rookies, 12 tackles, 11 quarterback hits, a PFF grade of 80.2, second overall on Detroit overall, offense or defense. Cut from the main roster in preseason, didn't make it to the 53, signed back to the practice squad and signed a 2-year, $1.65 million deal after sacking Josh Allen twice in 5 snaps. I think he came in... why... I'm forgetting names left, right, and centre here, boys. Edge we re-signed, who went out with injury, that he took the place of.
Charles
Harris.
Thank you very much. So to the place of Charles Harris. And, I mean, is it too much of a stretch to say that over 140 snaps emulated Harris? I mean, made us forget that he wasn't really there. I know that he is basically just a pass rusher at this point. He did see some more early down snaps later on in the year, but really with his arsenal, he's still a more kind of pass rush specialist, and Harris maybe had a little bit more versatility there. But his ability to get to the quarterback, to beat the tackles on the outside, I mean, he looks awkward doing it, but somehow so satisfying to watch on tape, and just salivating at the prospect of what could be with this guy.
Yeah, no, he's been wonderful this season, and it's great to see, because again, and I can't stress this enough, if you're doing draft analysis, anything like that, just start every player with a complete blank slate and don't take any of the extenuating circumstances into account. Because he comes from a HBCU, everyone goes, oh, no good, writes him off. The HBCUs are full of great talent potentially at the next level, especially last year. There were loads. And when me and Ryan started doing it for the first time on the College Pod, when we did the Legacy Bowl, when we did their combine and guys on there, he stands out like a sore thumb straight away. You know, he had a few years at Florida, wasn't able to get it done at linebacker, goes to work with Dion at Jackson State. Dion immediately saw his upside as a pass rusher, moves in there, and Christ, he had an amazing season. He was double-digit everything when it came to production. And yes, you could argue against the talent he's against, but if you watch the player and watch him and what he's about, you find the temperament, you find the character. It was very easy to see that this guy had what it needed to succeed at the next level. First, you have, and again, I go back to the whole Holmes and Campbell drafting certain guys type of thing, but this was another guy who felt disrespected, like he'd been written off. He'd had to leave Florida. He wanted to stay at Florida and perform there. They didn't give him the chance. He had to drop all the way down to the HBCUs to get an opportunity. He was overlooked in the pre-draft process, but he has a relentless motor, which you can see in games. He has an arsenal of pass rush moves, which you have seen. The bend is insane. The ability to get round the corner is insane. He made very good left tackles look stupid. He beat double teams against the Bills to take down Josh Allen. And you could see it in his game. When you possess that many different moves, you can see him setting tackles up. You know, he sets them up and then he executes a play or two later. And it's all part of the long game with him. They don't call him the problem for no reason, just because his ability to get into the backfield is unmatched in a lot of cases. And you saw it here, second most in rookie sacks, and he didn't even start a game till in the second half of the season. And the character as well, to be drafted, which he was very happy about, to then be cut and have to work your way back onto the team, work your way through the practice squad, you know, fight just to get a couple of snaps on the team and show what you can do. Because I think, well, he got 3 snaps in his first game when he got 2 sacks. It wasn't much, you know, to keep going and to not let the situation get to him and to just carry on grinding, carry on working to the point where he's taking bona fide starter reps at the end of the season. And he's even doing all right in the run game, which is everyone's knock on him, which again, lazy. Watch him. Yes, he has issues with it, but you can see with the way he handles himself, with the way he gets better, he will be able to have an impact in that eventually as well. So, you know, it was a great pick. It was always going to be a developmental pick. And like with a few of these other guys, I think the second year, you're really going to have to temper your expectations, because I think next year for him now, it is about trying to become a 3-down player, about doing more of the nitty gritty work in the trenches against the run game, whilst, still doing your pass rush stuff. But, I was delighted we got him. I thought it was a great find. Brad Holmes is obviously a student of the HBCUs. He went to North Carolina Central himself. So I think he's a lot more aware of talent in that area than a lot of others are. It speaks that we've got a great GM, we've got a head coach who's willing to believe, and we're getting players who, are desperate to succeed. And that mentality just fits in with the way Detroit plays. So, yeah, it was a great pick. I'll just straight up give this an A+, because, again, the production you're getting from the position, but even outside of that, the guy he is, the temperament to come back from all the disappointment he has, the plays he's made, you take it all into consideration, it can't be anything less than. And even Tom's grading system will not prevent him from A-starring this move, I would think.
A-starring?
A-starring. Yeah, we're A-starring here. We're going old school.
No, he was a C- for me. No, I'm kidding. Come on. The PFF pass rush grades. He was 88.2. Names that were above him: Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, Hassan Reddick, Nick Bosa, Jalen Phillips, Brandon Graham. That is a pretty incredible list of names. There's no jokers in there. It's just so impressive, right? And again, actually, as we were leading up to this, I was like, he only played 200-ish snaps. Is it an A? Like, you can't not give it an A+. I think given where he was drafted at the end of the 6th round too. We had a 6th round pick, and he got picked obviously in Malcolm Rodriguez. This is another 30 picks later. Where he was drafted, where he was halfway through the year, to have that kind of impact and just bring that kind of excitement, I think, to this fan base. We had loads to be excited about this year. And James Houston was maybe the most exciting story of the entire year, right? So it just absolutely incredible. Yes, there were questions around his run defense to some extent. Would I like to see improvements in that next year? Yeah. But if we're talking about expectations versus where he was drafted, what I thought we were getting, a guy that genuinely, there were reps where if you'd have told me that was Von Miller, I'd be like, yeah, sure. And there's very few players who can look like that. So yeah, from the value of what he brings, I think the versatility it gives us in what we show. If you think about the guys under contract for next year, or even just from this draft class, right? Hutch, Pascal, Houston, 3 completely different edges. And that gives us a lot of flexibility in what we want to do. So yeah, I think, like everyone, just incredibly excited to see next year.
Yeah, I got to finish it off with an A+ as well. Just spectacular level of talent, effort, and put it perfectly about like kind of what he's come from to get cut from the 53 and have such an impact from game 11 onwards. I think it was. He was unbelievable. And I mean, you'll be going into next year asking, can he start? Can he develop something in that run game so that you can actually play him on first down? Because what happens to his production if he's on for 3 downs? Like, could he be the first 30 sack player in the NFL? You don't know. You just don't know. No, I kid a little bit. But like, you've got Aiden Hutchinson going out there and getting almost 1,000 snaps for his 9.5 sacks. He did it in 140. I mean, if he did 7 times more the snaps, I'm not sure he's going to get 56 sacks. But like,
I mean,
what can't he do?
I mean, Tom said it. I mean, he adds such a versatile weapon to the group we already have. I mean, you have for Pascal, for his faults, he's the bigger, tougher guy ready to do more against the run. And if you get in 3rd and long, I mean, what the hell do you do as a DC, as an opposing offensive coordinator? I mean, you've got to look after Hutch, and then you've got this guy on the other side who can beat double teams as well. You can't double team 2 edge rushers because then you're light on the interior. You're light against blitzers. It gives you so much opportunity to do much more, and especially if Romeo or Charles will be healthy, one of them will be cut this offseason probably. You add that veteran presence in there, you've got a little bit of everything that you want to do, and it's just something we've never had. We've been there's been time we'd have been blessed to have one good pass rusher, let alone 4.
And he doesn't need to be a monster against the run, right? If you look at someone like Yannick Ngakoue, right? The last 2 years I know has fallen off, but his first 5 or so years in the league, he was pretty poor against the run, let's be honest. But he was still one of the league's best pass rushers, and that had immense value for that Jacksonville team. So, yeah, it's just so exciting, right? I know we've said that with a few players, but some of the flashes these guys have shown across the board, even the people we're not giving A pluses, it's just there's so much promise here.
Yeah. And let's finish off the draft class by just mentioning Chase Lucas, 237th in the draft, round 7, 275th consensus overall, 6 games, 6 snaps on defense, 3 tackles, 75 snaps on special teams, ended on IR in early December. I mean, this is an easy no grade for me. I had hopes that he could take over the starting slot role by maybe the end of the year, and it just kind of didn't really materialize. But he seemed to be getting some meaningful snaps on special teams, and if you can get that out of a 7th round guy, I was pretty hopeful going into the latter half of the year, and he kind of had that robbed from him. I'm hopeful that he can be a leader in that secondary, even if he's not starting at all in his career. But he just hasn't played enough for me to give a grade here.
No, likewise. I don't think there's been enough of a grade there, but I think there'll be an opportunity for him, especially in camp, because I am expecting us to gut out the corner room this offseason. I think only Jeff and Jerry are going to be left next year, which means there's going to be investment in the draft. I think we know that at this point. I think there may even be a raid into free agency as well, possibly for someone. So yeah, I think Chase is still going to have it. I don't think this is a case of he's going to be 2nd year, 7th round pick who's just no chance of making the roster. I think situation and happenstance will present him with an opportunity to be able to do something next year. If you can get him in and get him producing, and you can keep Jerry and Jeff playing well, and you get some more top level corners in the offseason, you've got the makings of a decent unit there. So the door is not shut for him yet, is all I'll say. I think he's gotten lucky with the situation he'll be in, unless if he moves back and then he's screwed. But the Lions won't give me that. So
here comes the good cop, bad cop routine. So I think we can grade him because he wasn't injured. I know he went on to IR, but the reason I didn't give Mitchell and JMO grades is because they were injured, right? And so their snaps were limited more because of that. I'm not saying Lucas is a massive disappointment. He's not. He's a 7th round pick. If he makes the roster, it's kind of he's done his job to some extent, right? But I think we could say C, maybe even C minus, because let's be clear, this is not a good cornerback room, right? So versus other opportunities in the league, he's got as good as any to get on the field here. He's also, and I can't remember if he's 24 or 25, but he's an older guy. This isn't a raw 20, 21, 22-year-old who's having to learn the position. He's the kind of guy that we would have expected. Yeah, he may not have the highest upside, but we know what we're getting. And honestly, I think they would have hoped, given how the season played out, that maybe he got on the field a little more. So whilst we didn't get the snaps to be able to really see what he could do, like for me, I would still grade it as, say, a C minus, because yes, he made the roster. He's a late pick. That's still impressive, but it's a bit disappointing he didn't get on the field more as a 24, 25-year-old rookie, given the struggles we had in our DB room, where we're getting people benched left, right, and center. I know he's not an outside guy, and when we think about Amani and Jeff, they were obviously the outside guys who got benched for short periods, but that still opens up opportunities in the slot. So I'm not going to live and die by the outcome of Chase Lucas, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more throughout the season.
So let's take the entire class and review then and give it an overall grade. Aiden Hutchinson, Jameson Williams, Josh Pascal, Kirby Joseph, James Mitchell, Malcolm Rodriguez, James Houston, Chase Lucas. Boys, how do you think they've done year one? Expectation versus the reality of what we have.
I don't know about Tom, but I find it very tough because it's been a very good draft class in terms of the production you've got. But for me, obviously, it's 3 years in. I really like to grade the draft class. You don't know really what you've got until then. You don't know whether the production is sustainable or what's going to happen. We all remember 2018, I think, when Kerryon had his breakout year. Deshaun Hand looked like Aaron Donald, and you had all these guys.
Hand never looked like Donald. I know you're doing
Hand
hyperbole
looked
right
good.
now, but that never fucking happens.
Shush. Hand looked very damn good, as did Tracy, as did Kerryon, and we all thought, oh god, this is a slam dunk class. It's going to be great, and it ended up being incredibly bad. So you've got to be careful about that. But in terms of the production they've had this year, it's I don't know. It's difficult because JMO's not played really, and you expected that. I think Pascal's the one who brings it down simply because I think he was a little bit of a reach, and he's done okay but not great. But then the late round guy, I'd give it a B plus. I think I would give it a B plus. Not that I think it is a bad class, because I don't think it is a bad class, and I think it's done really well. But when you've not had the production through injury of two of your top three players, or it is stymied them a little bit, I don't know if you can call it a slam dunk A grade class, which is really good. But I think it is a great class. I think it will be a great class. Sorry, I think the longevity of it, we'll be talking in 3 years and we'll say, yeah, it's an A grade. Guys had injuries to start with. They overcame that. Our late guys, they are very reliable members of our team now, and I think they're going to do well. But when the injuries affect it that much near the top, you do have to temper it a bit. I don't think it was ever going to be an A-star class just because you would have picked guys who could contribute immediately, and you would have gone after it that way. Whereas Holmes has looked in the long term with a lot of these picks. I mean, Kirby's not going to have reached his ceiling yet. Malcolm won't have reached his. So it was a very, very good class. But just the bit at the top just stops me from going to A right now. But in 2 years, I could very well be an A-star.
I'm actually a little higher.
Hey.
I think it's A minus. And I think I agree with what you said with the guys at the top. And I was toying actually with an A, and I was like, well, the JMO bit doesn't worry me, like we discussed during that section. But if anything, I think that meant we were able to get him. The fact he was injured and we weren't expecting much out of this year. So that's fine. I don't think you can, whilst yes, we had discussions over Hamilton or Thibodeau, like Hutch was the consensus one player. So I'm not going to overgrade Holmes for that. But with Kirby, I think given the number of snaps he had to have and some of the things he showed, that was above my expectations. With Malcolm, above expectations. With Houston, way above expectations. And very little where I'm like, I'm slightly worried about that, or that guy just didn't do what I thought. I mean, Pascal's really the only one that I'm like, oh, that's a little maybe underwhelming, but we're talking fractions and he was hurt this year. So I agree. I hope we look back on this class in 2 years and it's a clear A. It was really it was potentially an A class already, but for me, A minus, but super, super impressive. And I think when we look to the success we had in the second half of that year, we should not understate the role that the rookies had in that. Yes, Penei Sewell is a monster, and Amon-Ra St. Brown's brilliant, and Goff had his best season potentially. But the rookies were a really, really important part of that turnaround. And when there's other rookie classes which are thrown up against this one, when it comes to gradings by national media, I can't imagine there's another rookie class that had a bigger impact on the results and the win-loss record than the Lions had.
I'm going to go higher. And here's my theory on it, and it actually is maybe why I'm more pro PFF than most, because this is the sort of statistical approach that I take when it comes to this sort of thing. You, in a typical draft class, if you're a good drafter, hit on about half of your picks, and maybe that's the sort of barometer by which this is going to be judged. But what does even hitting on half of your picks mean? And that's good. Maybe it's 40% if you're average. What does a hit mean? If you're hitting on a 5th round pick, 6th round pick, 7th round pick, well, they're making the roster as a bare minimum. But we talked about 7th round pick as making the roster being at least exceeding expectations slightly. For a 6th, 5th, 4th round pick, you're talking rotational contributor at best being hit. You have a look at what happened here with Rodriguez and Houston and Kirby. Even at the bottom of the 3rd, you're not talking about someone that you expect to start, like, at all, pretty much. And then you have a look at what happens with Hutchinson. And, yeah, expectations is high. Sure, number 2 overall pick has to be high. But I think about how I'm projecting the future out, and there's projection in this grade that I was high on the class when we took it, and I am higher on it now. And that's just an incredible place to be. And it's an A. And I'm holding myself back for more. Because go into this next season and think that you can't get the absolute world from these guys. And Pascal is very much salvageable. We're not talking about someone on the scrap heap here. And Mitchell, like, good hands, good blocker. What can he do if he gets 500 snaps under his belt? Like, there's no one in that draft class that I'm thinking they're a bust. At all. Not close. So, it's an A. That's a spectacularly good one. If you can get 55 or 60% hit rate with some of those hit rate guys on the lower end playing really meaningful snaps, that's a fucking spectacular draft.
I did a very quick Google just as you were doing that in terms of how can we define a hit against the different rounds, and quickly came across an article which was percentage of players picked in that round who were starters. A 1st round pick is only a starter 30% of the time. And it kind of makes sense, right? If it's a 50% miss rate, roughly, and the others are role players, then actually it's only 30% of the time you're getting a starter in the 1st round. In the 6th round, it's 5%. And I think, yeah, you could argue Houston isn't technically a starter, right? But we could be looking in year 2 at guys that are playing almost starter level snaps. 2 of them are 6th round picks in their 2nd year in the league.
And I mean, I guess when you get into the 6th round, you've got like kickers and long snappers and stuff. It was easier for them to become starters. So you would guess some of that 5% is from inflated by inferior, well, not inferior positions, but you know what I mean? Yeah, specialists. Bits like that, easier to do. So, I mean, I think it all depends on what you. I mean, I think we've just heard like 3 different views here. Like Matt says he's taken the statistical approach. Me, I kind of look through the whole class as a little bit of one, and I look a bit more towards the future before I hand the grades out. I guess an interesting thing is, now that year 2's done, I know we're talking about this one, but what would you grade his 1st draft now? Because obviously Penne, Amon-Ra, Aleem's been really good, but then you have to put in the highlights. Barnes is still not there. Iffy, they've screwed him round, they've messed his position up. Jamar, as much as I love him, hasn't seen the field. Levi has been really injured. So it's interesting to see how the perspective of what you think this class is now to what you think his last one is with a year extra under the belt. Because on the scheme of things, you'd still think his 1st draft is pretty high. He's found 3 starters, a guy who's working his way towards a starter. A lot of guys don't get that out of draft class, but do you look at the ones that he didn't get right and it really negatively affects it? I don't know. What do you think?
It'd probably be B for me. And the reason being, Penne, absolute stud. The guys around him have all turned out pretty well as well in terms of the people who are in play for that pick. Satan, Parsons, Devontae Smith probably a tier down, but still like some really nice players in there. Levi has obviously been a disaster. There's no hiding from that. And it was to some extent predictable. Obviously, like he had a few health issues beforehand. McNeil has had, as we talked about last week, had a really nice 2nd half of the season, and I think is very much, I wouldn't say he's significantly overperformed where he was drafted, but is probably a little better than where he was drafted. Melifonwu has been disappointing, if we just talk about a high upside player in the same vein that we would Kirby Joseph, Melifonwu, I think, has been below expectations, at least for me personally. St. Brown, obviously incredible, and you should get bonus marks for that. Barnes, it's not just what we have or haven't got out of him, but also don't forget that we gave up our 5th rounder. Is that right? I think to go get him.
Yeah.
That's too, looking back, and I said at the time, like, that feels too aggressive now, given the production we've got, that we basically had 2 picks to get him. And Jefferson's obviously done nothing. So, yes, Sewell, stud. St. Brown, incredible pick given where he was drafted. The rest, there's more concern in there than there is this year. So for me, I wouldn't go down to a B-, but it would be only a B, I think.
Yeah, and I'm on the same page, really. I think a B is absolutely fair. And the thing that pulls it up is that Amon-Ra is a bona fide first-round talent in what he's put on tape and his production so far. And there's no reason to think he's going to regress. In fact, you know, I said maybe he'll regress because we'll get better and use him less because he's a bit of a do it all underneath, and that's how Goff's utilized him. But at the same time, he could go from strength to strength. And so in Sewell and Amon-Ra, you've got 2 potential all-pros, and that really hauls the grade up. So B, Aleem is a B in himself right now, and the rest of the guys out there are struggling.
But do you see how I mean about the sort of the perception of the draft class? Because this time last year, we were probably talking about, I don't know if we A-graded it, but I'm pretty sure it would have been quite high. Given,
so I'm actually referring to my article at the time when we're talking about this, and in terms of the draft class, I gave it a B+ at the time.
See, I think well maybe, but I think a lot of people gave it A's as well with Penai and Amon-Ra and that, and coming in well, and then
PFF
sort of
was super high on it,
and then sort of a year later, we're kind of at the same period still. I mean, we've got 3 high caliber starters out of it, and Barnes looks like he's getting there. But we've sort of soured on it a little bit on our grades and reduced it a little bit, even though not much has changed. And again, if the same happens with this class next season, it's sort of the same and not much has changed. Are we still going to be calling it an A? You see what I mean? It's how the perception changes with, and that's why I am with mine. I'm sort of not as high on it now. Well, I am high on it, but the grade is like there because I'm wary that whilst it's been good, something still might happen there. So we're just going to wait and see with it, really.
And yeah, sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of the context of what we think about this class, if we're sitting here 12 months from now and we don't think this class, the 2022 class, is as good as we think it is now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. And what I mean by that is a lot of the way that we've rated people is about opportunity. But what if Rodrigo doesn't start next year because we've made upgrades to actually play really well and keep Rodrigo off the field? We're going to sour on this class, and the Lions have gotten better. So it's all contextual. The reason why this class is ranked so highly right now by me, by others, is because they performed higher than their expectation. Well, in an ideal world, they wouldn't have had it. And in an ideal world, next year, they won't have it. So it's got to be taken in the context of the whole as well.
Agree. And let's be clear, B is not a bad grade. I mean, it would still be a top 10 draft class, I'm guessing. Like I say, I don't have them in front of me, but probably a top 10 draft class in the league. If you do that every year, you're one of the best GMs in the league, right? So I think if we, even where we were last year, and I agree, I probably would have given it a B+ last year and more a B now. The 2 guys I was excited about were Sewell and St. Brown. Sewell, I think, is in a similar boat to Hutch, which is like really good prospect, kind of thank goodness it was real because he's kind of what you expected in a great way. St. Brown was the exciting surprise. Whereas this year, I think Joseph, Rodrigo, and Houston are exciting surprises and probably even more exciting, especially with someone like Houston. So as a result, that's what gives me more hope. And we don't, like, if all 3 of those go and have great year 2s, awesome. Even if only one of them goes and takes another step forward, that's incredible for 3rd rounder and 2 6th rounders. So I think that the chance of us next year with this class turning into a B, I think is much lower. Could it drop a little lower, a grade or so lower? Yes, but I think there's just more upside in this 2022 class versus the first year, which was still a huge success.
But just also take into account that third year Jamar Jefferson is going to be absolutely fucking incredible. So you will need to raise your grades again for that. So I've not lost faith in you, Jamar. I kept with Logan for 3 years. I'm keeping with you for 3 years. You
Just
can
as-
do it.
Just as I
him.
started talking, I saw Geordie in the chat say Jamal the GOAT, though, and it really made me laugh. So
I have an affinity to him. I just really love it. And he got injured when he got going. I still feel bad about it. So
he did it twice as well. Like, he got injured twice when he got on a run. I feel bad for him, but anyway, we'll see. So that's the review of the draft classes, but we'll go into the rest of what Brad Holmes has done this year now, in brief, shall we say. I'm going to break it into parts: transactions in season, transactions in pre-season, re-signings, releases, and then finally the draft trade that was made. So we're going back in time here, gradually. So starting with the transactions in season. And the most recent thing that's happened is that TJ Hawkinson was traded to Minnesota. The Detroit 2023 fourth becomes a second, and the 2024 fourth becomes a third. This is a major one, so let's just talk about this again. Now that we're here at the end of this season, what do you reckon about that trade now?
I'm still not fully. I think we could have done better. I think is the thing where it was pick swaps at the end of the day. We didn't get no picks for him. We got upgraded picks, which is fine. And I think we've had to send the higher of our picks back because of what's happened this year. But I don't know. I feel, especially with him and Kwesi, I think our business with the Vikings. Brad Holmes will do business with anybody if it's for the benefit of both teams. And I think him and Kwesi are both like that. And I think maybe we got a little bit better of the draft deal that we did with them. And I think maybe with this one, they got a little bit of the better deal than we did out of it. But I think overall it's a purpose where I think it served both teams well. We've seen with us, I don't think we could afford to pay TJ, and I don't know if we wanted to. So we're going to get some higher picks in the draft. Same number, but a little higher. So we might do well out of it. I think you've got to wait until the full transaction's done to see what happens. If we pick two studs with the picks we get there, which we wouldn't have got otherwise, then maybe we'll look on it more favorably. But I think the initial reaction is I feel like we could have gone a little bit more, but I don't mind because the business we've done with the Vikings has been done for mutual benefit, and it seems to have worked for both of us so far. So I don't mind him doing that.
yeah, at the time I was a bit underwhelmed, I guess. It wasn't a great return, but I understood why we were doing it, etc. I think as the season's gone on, we haven't missed Hawkinson too much. I mean, you could argue we haven't missed him at all, but I think that'd be an overreaction. So I think I probably feel better about it now, having seen what happened the second half of the season and really the value that we lost in terms of not win-loss record, but performance from the other tight ends. Yes, I think Hawkinson would have had a better performance than Brock Wright in a lead role, but it wasn't that much of a drop-off, right? And so as a result, I think it's not a bad move. And whilst I'm disappointed we didn't maybe get more, the reality is it's not like Holmes had people picking up the phone and he was like, no, I'm going to turn down that offer. This was clearly the market, and it's just maybe a little less than we would have hoped.
I think when I look back on it and I look at what we got out of the room since we got rid of him, and I don't mean it as a slight on Hawkinson, so please don't read it that way, because I love the guy and I think he's a top bloke. When you heard Dan Campbell in Hard Knocks and before then in press conferences talking about wanting guys that you can rely on to do your job, not wanting, as he termed it, turds. And I think it's horrible to even put him in the same sentence as that, but I think it's what he meant by it. Hawkinson was sometimes a liability at the stuff that really Dan Campbell needed to happen to make this team work. The team works better without him. You give up the ability to have a 200-yard game with him, maybe, because he kind of had the ability maybe to do that at his best. He could go off for 100-yard games, 2 touchdowns, 150-yard game, 1 touchdown. Hawkinson had that ability. We all hoped we'd see it. Brock Wright doesn't do that. But if you said to Dan Campbell, you're going to trade that for a guy who is very rarely going to give up sacks and holds from that position, he'd go, I want that guy. Because it's fundamental to what we do. Hockenson, more often than not, committed drive killers than spectacular games. And that's the upside from letting him go. The capital we got back was less than I hoped, but it netted out to about a third-round pick value, which is what we got for other players who were in similar situations that we didn't want to pay, like Slay. So it's not like we have previous at this sort of draft value for someone valued that highly. And it seems very much like the league didn't think he was worth more than that. And if I have a look at Minnesota's position now, I don't want to pay him if I'm them. And they've traded capital for it. Now, as Ant said, not picks, but if you think about what the difference is between Detroit's 4th, which would have been 110, 120, and the 50th pick, or 55th pick, or whatever it is, that's a significant difference in terms of player, in terms of caliber of guy you're getting. And with the pick from Minnesota, we can get someone who falls who should be a first rounder for some reason or another and maybe pick up an absolute gem. And you have to be a very, very good drafter to do that in the 4th round. So I am higher on the trade now than I was then, and I wasn't that low on the trade at the time because I was fed up with him in terms of the blocking and the holds. It was just getting me down about how much it was putting this team back. So I love the guy, and he gave everything for us, and he was a talisman, but we function better without him.
I think it was schematically he didn't fit.
Yeah.
You know, it's an offshoot from a previous regime, and you know, it can't be helped. You know, he looks better in that Minnesota team because they kind of throw it a lot more. That, you know, they utilize the tight ends a bit more. He seems to be settled there, so it just seems to work better for everybody. We can argue about the compensation and that, but at the end of the day, like I said, trust Holmes to do his job. So, and we seem to have a good thing going with Minnesota where we're happy to do deals where both teams benefit, and we don't try and rinse the other person. And that's how I'd rather Holmes do his business, because more teams will do business with him that way. If he's not one of those who tries to take advantage and takes the mick.
All right, the only other two in-season transactions of note was that the kicker Michael Badgley was signed to the practice squad on the 5th of October and signed to the active roster on October the 29th. And safety CJ Moore returned to the Lions from the Texans practice squad on October the 24th. I don't think a lot of people remember that he actually left us for a little bit, but he was cut and returned. I'll lump in transactions in pre-season here as well, just to round that off as a bit of a longer bit. We signed from waivers from the Dolphins the defensive tackle Benito Jones in pre-season, a 1 year, $825K deal, OTC valued as production at $1.9 million. Isaiah Buggs we also got from free agency. Defensive tackle signed a 1 year, $965K deal, OTC valuation of $3.8 million on the year. John Kaminsky on waivers from the Falcons, 1 year, $965K, OTC says $4.9 million. Deshaun Elliott, 1 year, $1.1 million, OTC says $4.7 million. Chris Board, 1 year, $2 million deal, OTC says $2.9 million. And rounding this off with cornerback Mike Hughes, 1 year, 2.25, OTC says 1.23, and DJ Chark, 1 year, 10 million, OTC says 4 million. And I think Chark is the big guy that stands out there as someone who really didn't live up to his value and yet came on strong down the stretch. The rest of the guys in those transactions, including CJ Moore coming back and having a meaningful part to play, and Badgley doing his bit steadying the kicking room. Overall, I think it was a really promising set of transactions, new signings in that room, boys.
He's done a tremendous job. I mean, the situation he came into here, the cap was screwed. It has been ever since he's been here. It's still not in the best position at this moment in time. So you were always... He could have gone down the route where he started handing out loads of big deals, trying to get talent in straight away, backloading them into the future, and, you know, upsetting our financial security for years to come. He didn't. he's been very disciplined in his approach. Year one, it was a lot of 1 year deals, and hey, a lot of them didn't work. But we got Charles Harris out of it. And yes, injuries banjaxed his second year, but it still doesn't take away at the time. It was a very shrewd piece of business. And we got a lot of production out of him for real good value. And he earned his just desserts. Second year is the same again. Didn't panic. You know, we had a good end to the season. It might have been easier for him to go, oh, some good players here. Let's invest a lot of money. Let's try and go it again. No, he's been very disciplined with the approach again. Another lot of 1 year deals to guys who fit their profile. You know, you look at these guys, they're high character guys, they're big work ethic guys, you know, they've got a lot to prove, and they've all come from places where they've kind of been discarded and forgotten about. And Detroit's kind of the place where you can come and remake your career. I mean, Kaminsky, you only had to listen to him. He said in his exit meeting last year, he couldn't wait to get out of there and get away, and he wanted gone. Whereas this year, he wants back. You know, that's in 1 year. You know, they've sort of had that effect on him for what the commissioner's done, for what Benito's done. You've got 4, potentially 5 guys in there, solid depth pieces for your roster going forward, who if you can come to a good agreement with them and, you know, a friendlier deal like Charles did, and people might moan about Charles's contract, but if he'd have had a fully healthy season and been well, we'd still be saying the contract is pretty good. And it is, really, on paper. So if we can do the same with some of these guys this year, you've accelerated your build because you found a lot of guys with these 1 year contracts. Now, you know, Board hasn't worked, Chalk maybe hasn't worked, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Because it doesn't affect our cap going forward. I know Chalk's got a little bit of void years going on, but it's nothing critical, not compared to what we've had under Quinn for the last few years and the amount of dead cap we've had. It's negligible, and it still gives us building blocks to do a lot. So, you know, they just seem to scour the waivers really well and find the guys who give themselves the best opportunity to come here and work their way onto the team. And you can see it, like I say, 4 or 5 guys instantly right there who you might want back already and would deserve to be here and will play a pivotal role in this team going forward. So you've got to admire Holmes and the discipline he's had in, you know, preaching patience and making solid, if unspectacular, moves and getting high yield from these solid, if unspectacular moves. It's been incredibly high yield, and hopefully we can come to deals with some of these guys.
Yeah, when you go down that list, it's a seriously impressive run of transactions. I don't want to give him credit for Badgley only because that was a pretty painful time by the time we got him. And also Riley Patterson, who we waived before the season, then obviously had a pretty solid year for the Jags.
And his long snapper made him look really good.
That too. But yeah, so other than that, I think it was a really impressive list. And like I say, even Chark, yes, maybe didn't live up to the 10 million, but that's why you give 1 year deals. Means we probably get him back at a better price if we want to. And it wasn't a disaster. It just maybe didn't turn out exactly how we were aiming. So yeah, impressive list.
Just to let you know, I've summed up the value of the contracts and the value of the OTC valuations for those players. He paid out 18.105 million. The value of those players, including Chark, missing by 6 million, was 23.454 million, effectively getting value of 5.3 million above what you paid. And I'll run down the list of re-signings and released players now as well. Edge, Charles Harris, 2 years, $13 million OTC valuation for production. Obviously, injury hit, $865K. Linebacker Alex Anzalone, 1 year, $2.25 million deal. And get ready for this one. OTC valuation for this year of $10.8 million. Linebacker Josh Woods, 1 year, $1.55 million OTC valuation, $2.573 million. Tracy Walker, 3 years, $25 million. Obviously injury hit, but still got $2.28 million out of him. Evan Brown, 1 year, $2 million. OTC valuation, $3.195. Jason Kabinda, 2 years, $4 million. His valuation, $800K. Khalif Raymond, 2 years, $5 million. OTC valuation, $4.465. And Josh Reynolds, 2 years, $5.9 million, OTC valuation 4.547. In summation, some big misses there. Charles Harris, you were saying, Ant, is still a good deal, and it is still a good deal. But in terms of production, it's a big miss just for this year. It just, in terms of the differences between those two things, Kabinda, $2 million a year on average, only 800K, not so great. You add all of that in, Tracy Walker, the average per year, 8.2 million. He only got 2.28 million, and yet, mainly bolstered by Anzalone, spent just under 28 million, got 29.5 million out of it. I know that the Anzalone figure seems ridiculous, but I think what's going on there is that the average linebacker is bad. Like, the average linebacker just gets torched most of the time. And you have a look at his production this year, he wasn't a liability. Like, he was borderline good. And that's really valuable for an NFL team, and that shows up in his valuation. So even with some of those guys, it's a big hit. And you have a look at Raymond and Reynolds and Brown coming in and being a starter for a good lot of time for $2 million. Like, the guys are getting hits left, right, and center here.
So I know me and Tom have both just rushed over to Spot Track to find the highest paid linebackers in the league to say where that ranks with. And if that was the case and it was $10.8 million worth of play, he is ranked just above Matt Milano. That is just like absolutely not. So you've got Matt Milano, Eric Kendricks, Bori Wagner, Devondre Campbell. And you're just like, yeah, he's been good, but
okay, but
I would say the metrics are a little flawed on that one. But I'm not going to deny that Anzalone has had a good year. But we're talking about Brad Holmes here, so you look at the deals in question, and even if you're sort of questioning the productivity you've got and what money you're getting against what money you've spent, the most important part of this deal is that Brad Holmes has not threatened the future of this franchise by spending inordinate amounts of money that we're going to have to pay off down the line. A lot of these deals are short-lived deals, 1, 2 years. The 2-year deals generally, like you said, are around the sort of 5 million, 6 million mark. You're spreading it a couple of million over a couple of years. It's allowed us to go out and find potentially some really good guys there and to get them on good deals, whilst the ones who haven't worked, hey, you took a shot, it didn't work. No GM is perfect. No GM is infallible to paying out money on a guy who just does not work. But Brad Holmes does it in a way which protects the franchise whilst giving the player the opportunity to succeed. And the ones who do well, they get rewarded with contracts. It's a great system to have going forward. Players know they can come here, they'll get a fair shot, they'll get paid all right, and then they'll get rewarded if they do well with us. So while there's been a few misses in there, potentially, I'm not concerned, because as GM, I want him to have the fiscal stability and the cap management skills to allow us to keep on going forward. And he has. He's worked with a tight cap situation. He's not panicked. He's not spent a ton. And I think if we get Bugs, Kamish, Jones, Deshaun Elliott, guys like this back, I think it's been wildly successful. To fire off so many one-year shots into the dark and get 4 high-quality, potentially rotational guys out of it is a good success rate for me. I could be wrong, but I feel like that is a good moniker for a GM, a good level.
Yeah, I think we should remember this when we get to the re-signings. Now, a lot of the guys we just mentioned, whether it's Kamish, etc., I think we'd all like to sign. But the re-signings have probably been the worst part of Brad Holmes' GM tenure so far, I would say. Hasn't been disastrous by any means, but contracts that just don't look great going back. A lot of that is down to injuries, which is unfortunate, but I think the nature of it is the re-signings have probably been the weakest point. So just keep that in mind when we're thinking about re-signing everyone.
Oh, no, absolutely.
And sorry, that's not for you guys as such. It's more, I think it's very easy, and we touched on it maybe last week as well, to get wrapped up in the seasons people have had. And like Jamal Williams, a great example. People have got to come back at the right price. And actually, the money invested in re-signings has been arguably, probably not even that much debate, it has been the weakest part of Brad Holmes so far. So we should be careful about bringing everyone back.
Oh no, I fully agree there. It's not for the best part, Bim, but if you can't if the contracts aren't the greatest, then as long as they're not a long-term threat to the team, I think you can almost sort of give a little bit of a pass to it because he has thought about the long-term future with it. But he's not been in a position yet where he's had a lot of money to spend. So for us, he's a relative novice. If he's got 50, 60 million 1 year to spend, then I think we'll see just how competent he is when it comes to handing out the big deals, maybe going after the big free agents. That's just something he's not had a chance to do yet. So yeah, we do have to keep it in mind overall grade wise that there's a lot that he's not had a chance to do, so we don't know whether he's good or bad at it yet.
Then we'll just have a look at the players he's released, notable players that he released in the previous off-season, just to see how they did and whether we could have kept them around. Trey Flowers, he makes an appearance. We know how much he's liked on this show. He went to Miami on a 1-year, $2.125 million deal. His valuation this year was $717,000, so did not perform even up to that contract level. I don't think there'll be many people that are surprised, especially on this show, not myself included. Linebacker Jalen Reeves-Maybin was a fan favourite, but went to Houston on a bumper 2-year, $7.5 million deal. His valuation was $2.5 million. Cadarrell Hodge went back to Atlanta, 1 year, $930K. His valuation $2.4 million, so he did quite well. Dean Marlowe, perhaps the guy who's done really well out of this. Buffalo, we're talking about him in this offseason when they traded for him. He went to Atlanta and Buffalo traded for him as potentially one of the best trades that they'd made in franchise history. I heard some beat writers try and make that case because he had such a good run during their playoff run. He signed a 1-year, $1.2 million deal with Atlanta, which obviously went with him to Buffalo. His valuation was only $1.9 million, so he did outperform it, but not by a huge amount. And then Nick Williams signed a 1-year, $1.22 million deal with the Giants and did not have a valuation because I don't think he really played. So those are all the notable guys that were actually released at the end of the off-season. I don't think really there's much to discuss there. Other things that happened this year.
Do you know where the Trey Flowers highlight package is from Miami? I just want to know. I want to know if they were able to make one.
Well, I mean, he's got $717,000 worth of highlight packages, so I don't know.
What is that? Is that like he makes good Kool-Aid?
I'd hope so, considering we're paying him $13 million.
I say poor Trey Flowers, right? If you're taking those numbers, apparently Jalen Reeves-Maybin is over 3 times the value of him. Reeves-Maybin played 88 snaps for Houston this year.
I mean, yeah. Can I just say for Brad Holmes how good a deal that was? Because everyone moaned with it. I don't know. JRM had such a devoutly loyal following, which was never justified. And as much as I wanted him to do well this year, I'm kind of glad that it's been justified that letting him go was the right thing, because him as linebacker 1 at one point was that just shows you how bad your team is. So that was a very shrewd move to get rid of him. I think the players Holmes has gotten rid of, I don't think there's anyone I regret us letting go at all. I think he's got every decision bang on in that regards.
Talking about cap management now, and we'll come on to cap a lot more next week, but obviously this is looking back at what's happened in this year. In order to stay under the cap, we had to restructure Vaitai, Decker and Brockers this off-season, which was slightly painful, pushing some cap hits into further years in order to stay under the cap. But I guess in some form or fashion that did mean that DJ Chark was available to be signed, that we could sign some of these people from waivers like Kaminsky or Benito Jones, or make the re-signing of Khalif Raymond, because without these restructures that doesn't happen. And look at how well these guys did. So you've got to trade off one with the other. But I know that Ant, especially you, were very keen on not trying to restructure anyone. So looking back at that, do you feel like you got value for creating that cap space or not?
I think he's done an incredibly good job when it comes to the restructuring, recap and deal with all these, because again, in the ability to, he's not had much money to work with so far. Again, because of all the dead from the leftover of Quinn Trisha's, nightmare here and all the players we've had injured, it would have been very easy for him to restructure large amounts of money to free up cap to try and fix his roster quicker. We've only got, coming into this season, 4 guys who've been restructured, and it makes for about 12.5 million. It is not a lot of money. And when you take into account, as you've said, 2 of those restructures had to be done because of our injury situation. His hand was forced. He didn't have, it wasn't a case of he did it willingly. It was a case of he had to do it. So there are only 2 deals on the entire roster that have been restructured, through him going, right, I'm going to do it. And again, it's for such an insignificant amount of money. I just don't mind. I think, again, I love the discipline that he's shown in not pushing the cap down the road, because we've talked about this a few times and we'll talk about it next week. We're going to have some very expensive draft classes to pay for in the next few years. And if he'd have been pushing money down the can, putting loads of debt in there, our ability to keep some of these budding superstars we're seeing now would have been put in jeopardy. So for me, I'm very happy about the discipline that he's shown here. And like I say, 12.5 million in restructured money is not much compared to what a lot of teams have got on their books, not looking at you, New Orleans. I think I'm very happy with it. Now I look at next year, he can restructure a lot of money again. Does he decide that now we are on the precipice of competing for the NFC North and the playoffs? Does he decide to start being a bit more risky with it? I don't know. I hope, again, that he maintains discipline with it and doesn't do too much, but we'll see. But as of now, I'm very happy with what he's done.
I don't know how much Mike Disner has to do with that as well in terms of the cap management. It's hard to know how involved he is, but yeah, it's hard to look back on those and think that they weren't valuable. Like Brockers being one of them. No one, frankly, cares about Brockers in terms of what he's done on the field, but it's not really about the individual player who's being restructured. It's about what that frees up for the rest of the team and therefore the guys you bring in. So.
Yeah, and then finally the draft trades, which we kind of touched on earlier, but 32, 34, 66 for 12 and 46 was the final action I have to mention. And you mentioned, looking back, that you think that we got the best of that trade. Are you in agreement, Tom?
A+. And like I say, we're not talking about the players that came with that, but I think from a pure value standpoint, looking at if you're treating it purely like a draft chart kind of exercise, incredible value to move up that high.
Yeah, and as I say, I think it genuinely benefited both teams. So it was good that he was willing to not do the whole, oh, they're an in-division rival, I'm not going to do it. He saw a move that would make his team better. He made the deal. And yeah, I think both teams will benefit in the long run. So I like how he trades in the draft. I know we can say with the Barnes one, maybe it was too aggressive, but he's shown at least he was going to go for Levi, he was going to go to Josh, he listened to advice and didn't. So that also shows he's very flexible, that he's very strongly opinionated, but will also take on the opinions of others. So I feel quite safe that he's not going to put us in any harm when it comes to his drafting, and that it will always be for our benefit, regardless of whether we see it that way or not. So I really liked it. Jameson is a generational talent, or will be, I reckon. And he wanted him, he went and got him. And that's what you want to see.
And it's all been a gentle warm-up for when we move up to 3 to take Jalen Carter in a few months' time.
Oh, Tom, let's not fall out now, Tom. We got a long time to. We've got a very long time to. Stop it, Matt. Stop encouraging this.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, well, no, let's not.
Okay. So we talked about the draft class, we gave it a grade. Let's think about the transactions that have been made and cap management as those 3 things that a GM has to really worry about. Personnel in the front office is kind of hard for us to grade, so I'm going to kind of ignore that. How do you think you would grade overall Brad Holmes through year 2 in terms of player transactions, in terms of cap management?
So for me, I'm grading Brad Holmes at an A, because whilst there are aspects of his GM skills that we have not seen in action yet, like I say, with lots of money, what's he like when we're sort of in more of a win now situation and he needs to get a little bit more aggressive. But coming into this franchise, the job he came into, he inherited a team whose cap was screwed and whose roster was barren of talent. and he has gone about it in a way which has not put the team under threat. He's taken the lumps. He's gotten the dead money on the books so that we can get it off sooner. I think the financial situation he's been very good with, the 1-year deals, not risking too much money on certain players. And while we can say the trades here, there, some are eyebrow raising, some are really good. I think the critical part of it for me was always to do with the money and the roster construction. And we are not in agreement that this roster from 2 years ago, which the fat one left us with, is worlds better. And he's not had world beating capital to work with. And yet I feel like what he's had to work with and the development we've seen, I think we've inordinately got our money's worth out of it. And I think that this franchise is in a lot better situation going forward. It's got a young, dynamic core now, and it's about to have a lot of resources available to it. I think we're primed to be a very good team and make a run. So to do that in 2 years from the utter wasteland of a job he inherited, I would up the grade for him there, whilst waiting to see what he's like when the expectations change in years 3 and 4.
Yeah, if we're talking about the transactions in season, preseason, re-signings, etc., for me it would be a B plus. But for the job he's done overall, I think I'm going to go A minus. Only because I think there's a couple situations where, like, I know it's only a small thing, but the kicker situation, I think the way that the DB room has played out after a couple of years, there's just been a couple things which are not perfect, but overall it's been fantastic. Go on, Matt.
Yep. So I thought you were finished. I was going to jump in. For me, Brad Holmes, and it is kind of what I was talking about with the draft class as well. You talk about all the different disciplines of a GM, and how often do you hear about someone, oh, they're an elite drafter, but their in-season moves leave a lot to be desired, or, they can do this, but they can't do that, and they need to get someone in to do this to take it off their hands because he's not good at that, but we really like him for this aspect or something. You can't say that about Brad Holmes. And for that reason, it's an A+. Like, if you were giving me a ranking of all of the GMs in the NFL, I'd be hard pushed to not find a room for him in my top 5. Like, you have a look at the job, and put it well, the job he's done here overall, fantastic. The cap management is good. The player management is good. There are some aspects that could be slightly better, yes. But actually, the major decisions in that room, he's still got right. And then the drafting has been absolutely incredible. So, it's still too early to tell with some of these draft guys, but you can take a point in time, grade what's happened so far, and not preclude yourself from changing your minds when you get more information. There's nothing wrong with that. And right now, when we sit here, to be able to say that he is adequate to excellent at all of the disciplines a GM needs to be good at. How many teams are let down by someone who can't do free agency? He's an elite drafter, but he can't do free agency, and therefore they're stuck. We're not that team. And he's going to be our guy for the next decade, I think. At least. I just believe. I believe so hard. And that's why it's such a good place to be.
I don't know if this is the same question or not, but the question I was going to ask is, sitting here right now, you hire on Brad Holmes or Dan Campbell, and I guess the way to work that out is you can only keep one for next year and beyond. You lose one. Do you keep Campbell or do you keep Holmes?
Oh,
I hate
nasty.
you. I hate
Sorry, guys.
Oh, man.
At the end of a pod as well. That's a tough one.
Like, Campbell's the guy who's going to energize everything and really bring it together on the field. But you get a bad GM in, the rot sets in very quickly because you've got no talent to work with. And you don't have the guys that you can bring the best out of. They're not coachable, and that all comes down to the leader at the GM position.
So I have a way to quantify this, I reckon. So I know this is not to do with Dan Campbell, but we've given A-, A+ grades for Brad Holmes. Just quickly, what would you grade Campbell after 2 years? Just very quickly.
A?
I'd probably say the same. I'd think A-. So I'd have them similarly graded, I'd say.
So I'd say he's done an A as well. So you take Brad Holmes away from this franchise over the last 2 years. What do you reckon that Dan Campbell would grade at? because he might not be getting the right draft of players, he might not be getting the right sort of support,
So
etc.
what you're saying is maybe we retain the
So-
GM from yesteryear and we just bring in Dan Campbell.
So I'm saying, we're saying who would we prefer to lose out of these two? My argument is they are both as good as they are because of each other. I think that Brad Holmes drafts Dan Campbell's type of player, not in like a Quinn and Patricia where Patricia goes and asks and Quinn has to give it him, but Dan and him sit down together and they're kind of aligned on it, and Brad gives him the team to work with. Anything Dan Campbell does at this moment in time is not possible without Brad Holmes' drafting. But on the flip side, do you get all this production and development out of these players if Dan Campbell's not here with another head coach? With the type of guy we've got here, etc. Could another head coach have brought this team back from 1-6 to just missing out on the playoffs? Like Tom says, which one do we get rid of? But I think they're both so good at their jobs because of one another. I think they're a perfect pairing, and I think that without one another, they would not be as good at their jobs as one another, because a GM can be as good as he wants to be. You've seen Howie Roseman in Philly. Him and Sirianni seem to have created something big there. But before then, Howie was still good at his job, but guys were sort of screwing the pooch with what he was giving them and doing. But you'd say Howie's GM of the year at the moment in time, and you'd say Sirianni is well in there for head coach of the year. I think they're both so good at their jobs because of one another, and I think they're a perfect pairing. And I don't think I could answer Tom's question, because I think both of their jobs, I think both of their performances, neither of them is an A without the other, if you get what I mean.
I get exactly what you mean, but I am not accepting that answer. We're doing a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and the name of the person you would keep. Okay, we're going to go 3, 2, 1,
can
go.
I do head and heart?
No.
All right, I'll
Just
do
one
it.
word.
I'll do it. Holmes. I keep Holmes.
So would I.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And I hate you for that now, Tom.
But the thing is, and some guys in the chat have said it, just before I say this, Jeremy Reisman in the chat, coming on Thursday, by the way, so do check that out. Just said, damn, you really hit them with a Sophie's Choice. And someone else, Geordie Manchin in the YouTube chat, says, Tom, Sophie's Choice, Wilkinson. So there we go. At the end of the day, if you trust your GM, you trust them. There's no reason not to trust Brad Holmes at this point to bring in a replacement as head coach. And that is ultimately what's going on there. I think short-termism means head coach is more important, and long-termism says that the GM is more important. And you know what? I care far more about the long-term than I do the short-term. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah, but again, in the flip side, I've said this many times about Campbell. I think Detroit is a rare example of a place that needs a very specific type of coach to be able to come here and do it. I don't think, because he's been here, he's played here, he gets it, and I don't think another head coach forges the connection in this situation that we've been in with these sort of players that Dan has done in this time here. So, I'd never considered that question before, but I kind of feel dirty for answering it. So, but at the flip side, I mean, how great a job did, when they were both hired, how great a job was done in pairing them two together. Because on the think of it, I think we all had concerns when they were both first here. We're like, can these two coexist? They're talking a good game. Oh yeah, we'll get on together, we'll chat this, but it's all hyperbole at that point. But I think you saw after one season, they genuinely have a bond together, and they are both very humble guys who are very aware that they don't know everything, that they need outside opinions, that they need one another. And I don't know I don't know if I'm giving undue credit here, whether the people who did the interviews spotted this, temperamentality, the personality, whether these two were meshed together, but whether they did it or not, they've done a terrific job. I don't think you could have found a better pairing for us and what we needed at the time. Someone at the top who is very competent at their job and can elevate a franchise, which is something we've not had at GM for years, and a head coach who inspires and makes players better, and they work together. perfect pairing.
At the end of the day, you just have to give props to Sheila Hamp, Rod Wood, Chris Spielman. They were the three who hired the lot. And I think Holmes sat in on interviews once he was hired, but he didn't have the final say, and he wasn't really a part of who was getting hired a head coach, really. It was just more of a chemistry thing more than anything else. They just knocked it out of the park. And then you hear about how they talk about Sheila. If this is really going to turn around, it needs her. And she's doing the business. And Rod Wood took a heck of a lot of stick for what happened with the first regime that he hired a month into his tenure, and how different it all seems now.
And it was justified, but again, I think everyone's kind of learned. So, yeah, it's just a perfect pairing, and I love the pair of them. I honestly do.
Yeah.
I never want this partnership to end. So, yeah, I feel awful now.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I would never ever betray Dan. I would run through a wall for Dan. I would defend him against anyone who criticizes him, and you made me fire him.
in the comments, Brian says, if I had one bullet in a room with Campbell and Holmes, I would eat the bullet myself, and that's probably sums up how we all feel. I don't know how that's going to work, but still, we accept it. Yeah,
I mean, Dan
I'd shoot
Pasca's-
myself in the kneecap. I'd sacrifice a kneecap to it.
Dan Pask in the chat just said Ray Agnew helps Brad. Sheila hired Chris Spielman and also asked Barry to come back into the fold. Like,
Football guys.
She
don't care
hasn't
about the
long
team.
been the executive owner. I mean, she really hasn't, and it's such a 180 compared to Martha and William before them.
I think you're getting talent, but you're getting talent that cares about the team. Chris Spielman does, Barry does, Dan Campbell sure as hell does. So, and in Holmes's case, we've given him his opportunity to be a GM, so that's a big trust of faith. So it's worked. You've got the right level of talent and care for the team.
Yeah. Right. I think we're coming to a close here, boys. Any final thoughts on this?
I would like to ask one last question. So I'm on Raw St. Brad. What?
I was just wondering whether it was about long snappers or something.
No, I've made my long snapper joke today. So Amon-Ra St. Brown earlier this week gave out a little bit of a tidbit in one of his interviews that new uniforms are on the way. So speculation time. What do you reckon they're gonna be?
90s throwbacks. Not quite, but as in that is seeming. I think there was a Pride of Detroit article about it as well, but it seems that is a bit of a theme of the moment. And given that was the of the last 60 years, the glory days of the Lions, it wouldn't surprise me if we went back to something like that. Personally, I'd be quite for it. Of all the modern looking unis that have come out over the last few years, I've kind of hated them all. So I would love to go back to something relatively simple. And I don't know if the 90s counts as old school or not, but something like that.
I'm just having a look at a 1950s Bobby Lane game-worn jersey on Heritage Auctions, and I have to say, I don't want us to go back to that jersey. As much as I would love to have that on my wall, it looks like an amateur-era rugby jersey. Really, it's just not that pretty.
So what would you have? Or what do you reckon? What do you reckon? And what do you want?
You know where I want to be, which is the black jerseys. I want them back. I love the black jerseys, and I think it would just be great.
Rooney's gonna hate us, but black and silver. Oh no, in fact, black with the blue trim. The designs I've seen there look sick. Maybe a bit of silver in. We'll bring back the black.
Do you think there's any possibility that they go out of left field away from the traditional colours?
What, like the Red Wings and go red?
Well, so Brian has just said, what about the teals? Like the sort of away jerseys that the Pistons have.
Yeah. It's not. I mean,
no.
I love the teals, but that's a Pistons thing. You can't just adopt that.
Yeah, that's cultural appropriation, basically. So, all right. So, me and Matt are saying the black. Tom would like the 90s. What would you go as your left field one then that no one's thought? What would you like to see that's not been seen before as a Detroit Lions uniform?
I mean, I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I just didn't know if you guys had any thoughts. I mean, I was thinking just like a colour that Detroit have never worn.
So what would it be, Tom?
I mean, so when Liverpool decided that they were going to make one of their colours blue for a season, and the fans went nuts. I mean, they
Yeah, but
hated
that's a
it.
rivalry. We're not going to say purple here because that's Viking. We're not going to do that.
Yeah, but this is kind of what I'm thinking about. Could they do some sort of like green or yellow or like properly
Well,
go mad?
Oh,
I mean,
dear.
I wanted to. So the article, Mike Payton from Pride of Detroit, he referenced that the Portsmouth Spartans did wear purple. So, as in the original Detroit Lions, they were in purple and black. So, I mean, realistically, that's not
happen.
going to happen.
It
Surely,
could happen.
surely not. But
I know I'm asking, what would you personally like to see? So this just completely left field. Is there something that you'd be like, you know what? Actually, I wouldn't mind.
Not really.
no, not in terms of left field. But so I'm maybe not on the black unis bandwagon to quite the same extent. I think it's much more important we get a slick looking all white look.
I just like want to see the black unis that Dan Campbell wore. Like we'll see Dan Campbell in one again and do that, the nostalgia effect. But I think you can redo them, and I think they look a lot more intimidating than pajama grey. I hope those get launched into the stratosphere on one of Elon Musk's space Starlink satellites. It can go up there and fly off wherever. Don't want to see them again.
And you have a request in the chat for some research from Ken for our next show at some point, or college show, or what have you. Big Aries 70 on Twitch says orange ? Would certainly be out there.
Can I go slightly different direction? So not necessarily unis that we need or like rogue options there. But if we're talking merch overall, when are the Lions going to release the grit merch and all this kind of stuff? Literally every piece of clothing I see the coaches in, I want, and I will immediately. I'm just like, take my money. And yet we've seen none of it. So how about instead of going for some rogue bright orange uni, instead we get all that stuff as possible merch instead?
Yeah, no, it would be great. See, I'm a massive fan of like the fade shirts. I would like to see them bring in like fade, like white fading into blue or something. Like I love those sort of fade things. Like what Dortmund do with their kits with the black and the yellow. I would love to see some form of uniform variation on that with a fade. I think it would look cool. But yeah, I'm with Tom. I want the grit merch.
Yeah,
I just have this image of Tom running around after the coaches on the field now, going, "I want that shirt." Although which one you pick on to do it, I don't know.
Jeremy says, I need all the 3-1-3 stuff. And James A. McClaw says, Vikings are purple and yellow, Green Bay green and yellow, Bears are orange and navy, so that leaves us red and blue. Which sounds a bit patsy for me, to be honest.
Red, I don't know. Red is not a Detroit colour. I know the Red Wings wear it, but it just feels like it's not a Detroit colour.
Well, I mean, the Red Wings wear it, the Pistons wear it. It's just not Lions.
Pistons don't wear it that often, though. They're not.
No, but as in they're blue, red, and white are their colours.
All right, well, fair dues.
James says the Lions wore red once. I mean, I sources, please. Need the sources on that. All right, any further thoughts, boys? Because we need to draw this long-ass show to a close.
No.
No. Right, if you are on YouTube and Twitch, hang tight while I sign off and we'll continue to be live for you guys on the audio show. Our next podcast is going to be with Jeremy Reisman on Thursday if he doesn't threaten to pull out because of our takes on uniforms. Our next show on the main podcast is going to be Monday, February 6th. It's going to be our cap show and Super Bowl preview as we look ahead to that Sunday's matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Next show on the Cottage Podcast is a look ahead to the Shrine Bowl, which is fast approaching. Jeremy says you're on thin ice. Please don't forget to find us on ROTL. Yeah, we'll get to it.
I feel like we're on a 11 playing field here.
You can find us on Roar of the Lions UK on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget, and I said at the top of the show, you need to be subscribed to the YouTube channel. There will be a mini giveaway at 900 subs. We're about just over 100 away from that, and a bigger giveaway at 1,000 subs. There will be, I think, I mean, it will be your choice, but there will be a choice of a Lions signed helmet on there. So you need to be subscribed to the YouTube channel to be a part of that. And as Tom is just about to say, we have promised to do karaoke. No one wants to hear it, and no one needs to hear it, but apparently it's going to be happening. So please, please don't make us do it. Unsubscribe. Unsubscribe.
Yeah, suddenly we go to 0 subscribers. And also, we might have some new content dropping on YouTube this week, which obviously you need to be subscribed for and able to see. But for fans of Devon Witherspoon, there might be something coming in the next few days.
I've seen the first draft of this, and it's very, very good.
And speaking of Twitter, if you don't follow us, please do. We've just lost a load of followers because Elon's deleting all the porn bots. So it looks like our popularity is going down. It looks like our popularity is going down, but it really isn't.
I love it. The Facebook group for worldwide fans as well as Detroit Lions Fans UK1 Pride Worldwide, and I'm going to really try hard to get a lot of draft content up on the website, which is ROTLUK.com. Many thanks to you guys on the audio show for listening. We're going to continue on the live action, but for now, let's go Lions, one pride.
One pride.
One pride.
Recording stopped.
All right.
As much as it disgusts me to say this, like Lions Honolulu blue in a Michigan Wolverines-esque thing with the yellow, would that fly? Do you reckon? They darken the blue a little bit, use the yellow.
The Sparty fans will fuck you.
Oh, of course. I know. I'm no fan of Michigan. You know that. I'm very, very critical of them. I'm just trying to think of concepts that might work. Put the yellow with the blue.
I mean, the Michigan helmets are iconic. Like, they're just cool. But I don't want the Michigan influence in the Detroit jerseys. No way.
I just don't know why. You know, it must be a thing, but college is so much more creative with their uniforms. It's like, get some of these guys up to the NFL because they're so dead ass boring at the NFL level. I mean, there's very few like NFL kits you genuinely love. Like the Bengals one's amazing, the white one. I mean, that's cool. That looks like it's out of college. But there's very few I have genuine love for.
Shook just said something then like UCLA, and it's like UCLA is a bit chargery for me. That color scheme, the blue and yellow.
I just don't think like the Lions are a traditional franchise. Let's say I just don't want to take too many risks with it. At least from now.
Do you know the urban greens that the Pistons wear? Is it called urban green? You know those street green things they have.
Well, as in there from this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is it St. Cecilia's? Can't remember, but it's themed around the local gym.
Yeah. Would that color work with the Lions alternative, a green one?
I think someone.
Or it's not too Spartan-y for like U of M fans. Doesn't look too Spartan-y. But I'm just thinking, if you are going to have an alternative, which is a different, maybe green would be the route to go. Because I think the Pistons look really good in that green. I know it's different sport, but
it's really nice.
It is,
and also it's a cool thing to be recognizing kind of a famous local place. So
I do think that we could do with a white-dominated jersey that has significantly more blue on it than it does now. A bit more 70-30 rather than just like 95-5 white, because there's a little bit of blue trim to it but barely anything, and I think it could be a bit more equal, but then that could look horrible. We could look like Bristol Rovers. I don't want that.
I think if we did a fade, I'd buy a fade like that. I'd buy 2 of them.
Big Aries is just about to unite the room by saying, could the Lions play up the silver more?
If it was actually silver, then yes. I know
so my answer is no. Then
I know the pajama greys are considered silver, but they're not silver. If you're going to do silver, it's got to be more chrome silver so that it looks silverish. I could get behind that, but they've got to do it right. Just those pajamas should not be allowed back in the building ever again. So you've got to do something different with them. I think the black and silver looks good. I do. I think if you mesh that a little bit, you've got a lot of potential with that. I don't want to see the black back. I just think it looks intimidating. It looks, you know, I don't want to see Dan Campbell charging at me in that. I'll be like, oh Jesus Christ! It's a lot more intimidating than the grey is. Just personal opinion, though.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'm not against the black uni. I'd be tempted to have less blue on it. I think I'm not convinced by the black and blue together. So maybe if the numbers were white rather than blue and there was blue elsewhere, or it was kind of an outline blue, but the actual fill was white or something like that, I could be more convinced by it. I think the like block blue numbers on the black just doesn't really do it for me. But
it clashes significantly, but you don't want
It
to look
does
too raidery either.
Well, it looks a bit XFL-y, like, you know, it's a bit more for a promotion of some form. And I do agree. They did look cool, but yeah, I think I've cooled on them a little bit.
or go like full blackout. So as in like
Have we ever
black
had
everything, black numbers. Obviously, you'd have a little bit of trim in there, but ideally, because you can use multiple helmets now. Am I right in saying that, or
Yeah.
is that a change this year?
Yeah.
So you could do some kind of blackout helmet as well. And suddenly, if you only use a little bit of trim with the Honolulu blue, but it's like a bit like the theme right now. Like I love those Bengals unis, and like our white, all white look as well. I think is really nice. But like a blackout uni would be quite cool. I think
the Barry shirt that I got, right? Something like that would be pretty cool.
Which
have
is
we had a blackout uniform before? Certainly not in my time, and in the recent time before that. Have the Lions ever had blackout? I think it would look cool. Put silver trim on it. I think there's potential to have something there.
Sorry, yeah, I know the Barry one you have, which I mean that is pretty much blackout, right? And then a little bit of like silver or white trim or something like that.
Yeah.
So just add a little bit of the Honolulu to that. I think that could work.
Horribly
On that, I'm probably going to need
wear, actually. I will say that it bends in the wrong place, so whenever you have to not stand, it's weird. But hey, you know, it was only 120 quid. So
that's it. When we go over there, I'm loading up on as much merch as I can get my hands on, so I don't have to pay the import tax for it when you come back and all that sort of stuff. I imagine
it's a good point. There's better be a decent rebrand because we're going to be remortgaging houses to invest in stash when we're over there next year. So
if the Lions, if the Lions do get significant distance into the playoffs next year, I am doing both. And I've already told Sarah, and she said, "You fucking what?" And I said, "You heard." So
I can just imagine go and do a stadium tour of Ford Field, and Tom just disappears into locker rooms looking for all the coaches' shirts. Where the fuck are those grit shirts? I'm going to get
Give
one.
Me the
if
grit.
it still kills me. Just knock on Brad Holmes' door and just be like, "Sorry, Brad, I know you're busy, but I need that shirt. Really, I do."
Right, I think it's time that we draw this one to a close, fellas.
Yeah.
It's been a long stint. Right, folks, don't forget to tune in Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. UK time for Jeremy Reisman. We're going to have a good chat with him and make sure he knows what's what when it comes to English cuisine and food. So if you're a fan of food, then you want to tune into that. But anyway, thanks to Tom and to Ant, and thanks to you guys for watching. If you're on Twitch, I am going to raid Chris on the pod pre-show now, so hang tight there. But for everyone else, we'll see you on Wednesday for the college show.
Yeah, and if you do go onto Chris's and pod stream, just let them know that they've upset us. So, you know, give them some payback on our behalf.
I'll do my best. Right, we'll see you all soon. Bye for now.
See ya.